The horn blares, a long, angry note that seems to vibrate in your own chest. Outside the windshield, a river of red taillights flows into a concrete horizon, a city breathing a slow, weary sigh of exhaust and impatience. The screen in your hand glows with a life of its own, a relentless stream of notifications, emails demanding immediate attention, headlines broadcasting a world of anxieties, images of lives that seem brighter, fuller, and always just out of reach. There is a feeling, familiar to so many of us, of running on a wheel that spins faster and faster, yet never moves an inch. A feeling of being busy, endlessly, exhaustingly busy, but for what purpose? A quiet dread that settles in the stillness of the night, a sense that we are adrift, caught in a current, not of our own making. This experience, this quiet desperation behind a mask of productivity, is not a personal failing. It is the fever of our time. We have been taught to chase, to accumulate, to strive for more success, more possessions, more followers, more experiences to display. Yet, this chase often leads not to fulfillment, but to a profound sense of lack, a persistent, low-grade anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of our days. We become trapped in a cycle of reaction, reacting to the demands of our jobs, the expectations of others, the fears generated by our own minds. We are pushed and pulled by forces we rarely stop to examine, living a life that feels less like a journey and more like a long, frantic response to an endless series of emergencies. But what if there was another way? Not an escape, not a magic solution that promises to remove all difficulty from our lives, but a different way of seeing. What if there was an ancient lens, a wisdom refined over centuries, that did not offer a way out, but a way through, a path that suggests the very fabric of our struggles, the moments of frustration, the heartaches, and the failures are not obstacles on our path, but are the path itself. With this lens, a traffic jam is no longer a prison, but an invitation to breathe. A failure is not an indictment of our worth, but a stern, compassionate teacher. A difficult person is not an enemy, but a mirror reflecting our own inner turmoil. What if everything that happens to you is in fact happening for you? What if it was all a lesson, waiting patiently to be learned? To begin this journey, we must first be willing to look directly at the nature of our own experience without turning away. In the language of this ancient path, the first lesson is the lesson of dukkha. When translated into English, dukkha is often given the word suffering, and for many, this is where the door closes. The word feels heavy, pessimistic, even morbid. It seems to suggest that life is nothing but a valley of tears, a grim sentence to be endured. But this is a profound misunderstanding, a failure of language to capture a far more subtle and empowering truth. Dukkha is not a declaration that life is miserable. It is a diagnosis. It is the compassionate, clear-eyed observation of a condition that affects us all, and it is the necessary first step toward healing. Imagine going to a physician after months of feeling unwell, a strange malaise you can't quite identify. The physician, after a careful examination, looks at you and says, "I know what this is." In that moment, you don't feel despair, you feel relief. The formless anxiety now has a name, a shape. The problem has been identified, and because it has been identified, a path to treatment can now begin. The acknowledgement of dukkha is exactly this. It is the Buddha, as the great physician, looking upon the human condition and saying, "I see the dis-ease, I see the subtle friction, I see the unsatisfactoriness, and because I see it, I can show you the way to be free from it." So, what is this condition, this dukkha? It manifests in three distinct ways, moving from the obvious to the incredibly subtle. The first, and most easily understood, is the dukkha of painful experiences. This is the raw, undeniable pain of life. It is the throbbing of a migraine, the sharp grief that follows the loss of a loved one. It is the sting of betrayal, the humiliation of public failure, the gnawing anxiety of financial insecurity. It is the ache in our bones as we age, the fear that accompanies a serious medical diagnosis. This is the suffering we all know and agree upon. It is the overt static of life, the loud and jarring notes that demand our attention. When we are caught in that traffic jam from our opening story, the frustration, the impatience, the feeling of being trapped, this is a clear taste of it. This form of dukkha is an unavoidable part of having a human body and a human heart. It is the reality of our fragile existence in a world of sickness, old age, and death. But the lesson of dukkha goes deeper. The second form is the suffering of change. This is a far more subtle and pervasive experience, one that weaves itself even into our happiest moments. Think of a perfect day. Perhaps you are on vacation, watching a beautiful sunset with someone you love. The air is warm, the moment feels timeless, and a sense of profound joy washes over you. Yet, even within that peak experience, a tiny, almost imperceptible shadow can appear. It is the thought, "I wish this could last forever." And in that very wish, dukkha is born. It is the quiet anxiety that this perfect moment is fleeting, that the vacation will end, that relationships change, that the sunset will inevitably fade into darkness. This is the suffering created by our clinging to pleasure. We try to grasp a sunbeam, to hold onto a beautiful melody, to freeze a moment of joy. But the nature of reality is to flow. Life is a river, not a statue, and our attempt to build a dam in that river, to stop the ceaseless current of change, is a source of constant, underlying stress and inevitable disappointment. We achieve a long-sought goal, and for a moment there is elation. But it is quickly followed by the fear of losing that achievement or the emptiness of what's next. This is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of seeking lasting happiness in things that are, by their very nature, impermanent. The third and most profound form of dukkha is the suffering of conditioned existence itself. This is the most difficult to see because it is the very water in which we swim. It is a background hum of dissatisfaction that is woven into the very fabric of being a separate self. It's the feeling that something is not quite right, that we are not quite whole. It is the low-level friction of just being. We are conditioned beings, meaning our existence is dependent on a web of causes and conditions we do not control. Our bodies require food, water, and air. Our minds are a cascade of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions, arising and passing away based on countless inputs our past, our biology, the conversation we just had, the news we just read. There is nothing solid or stable to hold on to. This fundamental instability, this lack of a secure, independent core, is a source of deep, existential unease. We spend our entire lives trying to secure our position, to solidify our identity, to build a fortress for ourselves, but we are building it on shifting sands. This is sankhara dukkha, the inherent stress and unsatisfactoriness of being a composite, conditioned, ever-changing process that we mistake for a solid, enduring me. To make this deeply practical, we can turn to one of the most powerful teaching stories, the parable of the second arrow. Imagine you are walking through a quiet wood. Without warning, an arrow flies from the trees and strikes you in the arm. The physical pain is immediate and intense. This is the first arrow. It represents the unavoidable, painful events of life sickness, accidents, loss, the unkindness of others. These things happen. They are a part of the landscape of human existence. They are outside of our control. The pain is real. It is objective. Now, what is our typical response? Do we simply tend to the wound? Rarely. Instead, we immediately begin to lament and analyze. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? This is horrible. My day is ruined. I can't believe this happened. We become infuriated with whoever shot the arrow. We sink into self-pity, imagining all the terrible consequences. We replay the event over and over in our minds. This entire cascade of mental reaction, the anger, the fear, the resentment, the blame, the despairis, the second arrow. It is an arrow that we shoot into ourselves, right next to the first one. The pain of the first arrow is real, but it is finite. The suffering created by the second arrow, however, is potentially infinite. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is our resistance to the reality of the pain. The first arrow is the unfortunate event. The second arrow is our narrative about the event. The first arrow is pain. The second arrow is suffering. The lesson of dukkha is the lesson of learning to see the profound difference between the two. The path to inner peace is not about developing an invulnerable shield that can stop all of life's first arrows. Such a shield does not exist. The path, instead, is to learn the wisdom and the discipline to not pick up and fire the second arrow. When we truly grasp this, our entire perspective shifts. The goal is no longer to manipulate the world into a state where we are never hurt or disappointed. That is an impossible, exhausting task. The goal becomes internal. The work is to train the mind to not react with automatic aversion, clinging, and fear. The lesson of dukkha, therefore, is not a pessimistic surrender to misery. It is the most optimistic and empowering realization possible. It tells us that the vast majority of our anguish is self-generated, and if it is self-generated, it can be ungenerated. If we are the ones firing the second arrow, we can also be the ones to lay down the bow. To recognize dukkha is to begin the path of the spiritual warrior. It is to take responsibility for our own inner state. We stop blaming the world, other people, or our circumstances for our suffering, and we begin to look with gentle curiosity at our own reactions. We see the rising of anger, of jealousy, of fear, and instead of being consumed by them, we begin to recognize them as second arrow phenomena. This is the first great lesson on the path to freedom. It is the diagnosis that makes the cure possible. So we have been struck. We see the wound from the first arrow, and we feel the sting of the second. We understand now that our true problem lies with this second, self-inflicted wound. Acknowledging this is the beginning of wisdom, and it naturally leads us to the next, most vital question. If our suffering truly comes from this second arrow, then we must ask, who or what is shooting it? What is the force within us, the deep-seated habit that compels us to react with such predictable patterns of aversion and craving? To fully understand the lesson of suffering, we must now turn our gaze toward the lesson of its origin. Having seen that our true anguish arises not from life's unavoidable pains, but from our reaction to them, we are left with a critical question. What is the mechanism within us that insists on firing that second arrow of suffering? If we are the ones causing our own torment, what is the nature of the impulse, the deep and driving force that compels this act of self-harm? The wisdom traditions have a name for this force. It is called tanha. Like dukkha, tana is a word that loses much of its precision in translation. It is often called desire or craving, but its true meaning is closer to thirst. It's a deep, primal, and relentless thirst for things to be different than they are. It is the engine of our restlessness, the unquenchable wanting and not wanting that keeps us spinning on the wheel of modern life. Tanha is the archer. It is the hand that draws the bowstring and sends the second arrow flying. This is the second noble truth, the diagnosis of the origin of our suffering. And just like the first truth, this is not a moral condemnation. It is a compassionate and clear-eyed look at the very root of our dis-ease. This thirst is not a personal flaw. It is a fundamental, impersonal aspect of the unenlightened human mind. To be free, we must understand it, not judge it. Tanha manifests in three primary streams, like a great river splitting into different currents that all lead to the same sea of dissatisfaction. The first, and most easily observed, is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the constant pull of the world upon our six senses, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and even the mind, which craves pleasant thoughts and ideas. In our modern world, this stream has become a raging flood. It is the thirst for the taste of a gourmet meal, the sound of a new album, the sight of an engrossing film. It is the pleasant sensation of a hot shower, the alluring scent of perfume, the intellectual satisfaction of a clever idea. It is the craving for the digital validation of a like or a positive comment. The problem, it must be said, is not the pleasure itself. This path does not teach that pleasure is evil or that we must live a life of grim denial. A sunset is beautiful, and there is no harm in enjoying it. The problem is the thirst. It is the clinging, the dependency, the mistaken belief that these fleeting sensory experiences can provide a stable and lasting happiness. This thirst creates a cycle known as the hedonic treadmill. We experience a pleasure, and our brain delivers a small reward. For a moment, we feel satisfied, but that satisfaction fades, and our baseline expectation for happiness resets at a slightly higher level. The next time, we need a slightly more intense, more novel, or more prolonged pleasure just to feel the same level of satisfaction. The meal must be more exotic, the vacation more spectacular, the entertainment more stimulating. We are constantly running faster and faster just to stay in the same place emotionally. This is the fundamental business model of consumer culture to create and feed this kama tanha, to convince us that the next purchase, the next experience, the next upgrade will finally be the one that quenches our thirst. But it never does. It cannot, because we are trying to fill a spiritual void with material things, a thirst for the eternal with things that are, by their very nature, temporary. The second stream of this river is deeper and more treacherous. It is bhavatanha, the thirst to become, the craving for existence. This is the deep-seated desire of the ego to solidify itself, to prove its existence, to carve out a permanent and significant identity in the universe. It is the craving to be someone, to be successful, to be seen as intelligent, to be considered attractive, to be known as a good person, or even to be known as a rebel. It is the relentless, lifelong project of constructing and defending the story of me. This thirst is the fuel for our ambition, our tireless pursuit of fame, status, and power. It's what makes us check our email at midnight, obsess over our follower count, and feel a deep sense of shame when we don't live up to the image we have created for ourselves. This craving to exist is why criticism stings so deeply. It is perceived as an attack, not just on an opinion, but on the very foundation of our being. It is why praise is so intoxicating it feels like a validation that our constructed self is real and valuable. Bhavatanha is the architect of our identity, constantly working to build and reinforce the walls of the ego. But this is an exhausting, impossible task, because it is an attempt to make something permanent out of processes that are in constant flux. We are trying to build a stone monument out of flowing water. This deep desire to be, to continue, to last forever, is in direct conflict with the reality of an ever-changing world, and that conflict is a profound source of dukkha. The third stream is the shadow of the first two. It is vibhavatanya, the thirst for non-existence or annihilation. This is the energy of aversion, of pushing away. If kamatana is pulling what we want towards us, vibhavatana is violently shoving what we don't want away. When we experience pain, physical or emotional, the immediate reaction is driven by this thirst. I want this to stop. Get this away from me. I want this feeling to not exist. This aversion, this hatred, this anger is not the opposite of clinging. It is just another form of it. We become just as energetically bound to the things we hate as we do to the things we love. The person you resent can occupy your mind more completely than a dear friend. The past trauma you refuse to face holds you in its grip with chains of iron. You are not free from it. You are enslaved by your very rejection of it. On a daily basis, vibhava-tonya is the irritation we feel at the slow driver in front of us, the flash of anger at a political opinion we disagree with, the desperate urge to numb ourselves with distraction when a difficult emotion arises. At its most extreme, this thirst for annihilation can manifest as self-destructive behavior, or even the desire for death, the ultimate wish to make the painful self and its world cease to be. It is the desire to escape, to destroy, to negate, and it is just as powerful a source of suffering as the craving for pleasure and existence. These three streams, the thirst for pleasure, the thirst for existence, and the thirst for non-existence, are the triforked root of dukkha. To illustrate this state of self-imprisonment, there is a classic parable. Imagine a monkey trap, which in some parts of the world consists of a coconut with a small hole drilled in it, just large enough for a monkey's open hand to fit through. Inside the coconut, a handful of delicious nuts are placed as bait. The monkey comes along, smells the nuts, and slips its hand inside the coconut. It grasps the nuts, making a fist, but now its fist is too large to pass back through the hole. It pulls and pulls, screeching in frustration, but it cannot get its hand out. The trappers return and easily capture the monkey. The monkey's predicament is tragic and absurd. At any moment it could be free. The trap is not holding the monkey. The monkey's own craving is holding the monkey. The coconut itself has no power. The power lies in the monkey's clenched fist, its absolute refusal to let go of the nuts. The moment it would choose to open its hand, to release its grip, it could slide its hand out and scamper away to freedom. We are that monkey, and our life is that coconut shell. The nuts are the countless things we cling to with a clenched fist. Our desire for a specific person's approval, our attachment to being right in an argument, our resentment over a past injury, our craving for a particular pleasure, our fierce grip on a specific identity. We cling to these things, believing they are essential to our happiness or survival, without realizing they are the very instruments of our entrapment. We pull and we struggle, blaming the trap, blaming the world, blaming others for our feeling of being stuck. But our suffering does not come from the trap, it comes from our own clenched fist. The entire spiritual path could be described as the process of learning to gently, wisely, and compassionately open that fist. This is the diagnosis of the cause of our illness. Tanhathis threefold thirstis, the force that powers the hedonic treadmill, that drives us to exhaustion in the project of self-building, and that binds us in chains of anger and aversion. Seeing this clearly is not a cause for despair, but for hope, because it shows us that the cause of suffering is not random, nor is it located in the external world. It is a specific, observable process within our own minds, and if we can see it, we can work with it. We are the monkey with our fist clenched tightly in the jar. We see that our suffering comes from this desperate grip. The next natural question is, why is this grip so painful and ultimately futile? It is because the very things we are trying to hold on to are like smoke. They have no substance to be grasped. To understand the inherent foolishness of our grip, we must now turn our gaze to the lesson of the very nature of those nuts we so desperately crave. We must turn to the lesson of impermanence. We now see the force that drives our discontent, the relentless thirst of tanha that keeps our fist clenched around the nuts of our desire. We are trapped, not by the world, but by our own desperate grip. The next lesson provides the key to unlocking that grip. It does so by revealing the very nature of the nuts we are clinging to. It shows us that we are trying to grasp a handful of smoke. This lesson is the lesson of anicca, or impermanence. It is one of the three fundamental marks of all existence, a truth so profound and pervasive that once we begin to see it, we see it everywhere, in everything. And like the previous lessons, it is not a reason for despair, but a direct path to liberation. From our limited human perspective, we create an illusion of permanence. We build stone buildings, write laws, and establish institutions, all in an effort to create a sense of stability and predictability in a world that is fundamentally wild and untamable. We look at a mountain and perceive it as the very symbol of constancy, an eternal, unchanging monument. But in the grand sweep of geologic time, that mountain is a fleeting thing. It was thrust up by unimaginable forces, and it is being worn down, grain by grain, by wind and rain. It is a slow-motion wave in the ocean of existence. Empires that once seemed invincible now exist only as scattered ruins and stories in a book. Stars that light our night sky are burning through their fuel, and in a time frame that dwarfs human history, they too will collapse and die. The entire cosmos is in a state of ceaseless flux, a majestic, silent dance of arising and passing away. Seeing this, truly feeling it, can be a profound medicine. Our own personal dramas, our anxieties and ambitions, which seem so enormous and all-consuming, are revealed to be tiny ripples on the surface of an infinite sea of change. This perspective doesn't invalidate our experience, but it gives it context, a sense of humility and spaciousness that can be profoundly peaceful. But we don't need to look at mountains and stars to see anicca. We can see it in the most intimate laboratory we have, our own body and mind. Look at your body. You think of it as yours, as a solid, continuous thing that you have possessed since birth. But it is not a thing at all. It is a process. It is a colony of trillions of cells, constantly dying and being replaced. The skin you have today is not the skin you had a month ago. Your skeleton is not the same skeleton you had a decade ago. You are breathing in air, taking in food and water, transforming these elements into what you call you, and then expelling them. Your body is a river of biological activity, a temporary vortex of energy that maintains a recognizable shape for a few decades, and then dissolves back into the elements from which it came. There is nothing solid to hold on to. The mind is an even more dramatic display of impermanence. Take a moment to simply watch it. Where does a thought come from? It appears, as if from nowhere. It lingers for a moment, and then, just as mysteriously, it vanishes. A feeling of happiness can arise, warm and expansive, only to be replaced moments later by a flicker of irritation, or a wave of sadness, or a memory from childhood. Our inner world is a relentless cascade of mental events. It is like watching the weather. Clouds form, drift, and dissipate. The sun shines, then is hidden. The wind blows, then is still. We would never make the mistake of pointing to a single cloud and saying, "That is the sky." We know the sky is the vast, open space in which all the weather happens. And yet, we constantly make this mistake with our minds. We point to a single angry thought and say, "I am angry." We cling to a happy feeling and say, "This is me," and then despair when it fades. We have been taught to identify with the fleeting weather of our minds, rather than with the vast, open sky of awareness in which it all unfolds. The friction between our thirst for permanence, our tanha, and the absolute reality of impermanence, anicca, is the very source of our suffering. It is a battle we are fighting against the fundamental laws of the universe, and it is a battle we can never win. We desire a relationship to remain forever in the bliss of its early stages, but people grow and circumstances change, and our resistance to this natural evolution creates immense pain. We cling to our youth and health, dreading the inevitable reality of aging and sickness. We grasp at moments of success, trying to freeze them in time, which only prevents us from living fully in the new moments that arrive. Anicca is the unbreakable law. Tanha is our constant protest against that law. The suffering we experience, the dukkha, is the sound of our futile protest echoing in our own hearts. There is a story that illustrates this with heartbreaking beauty. A young woman named Kisa Gautami had her first and only child, and she loved him more than anything in the world. But the child fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. She picked up his small, lifeless body and went from house to house, from person to person, begging for a medicine that could bring him back. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, all recognizing that she had lost her senses. Finally, a compassionate and wise man told her, "I do not have the medicine you seek, but I know someone who does. Go to the Buddha." Kisa Gautami went, her hope reignited. She bowed before the Buddha, presented the body of her son, and pleaded for the miracle medicine. The Buddha looked at her with boundless compassion and did not dismiss her plea. He said, "I can help you, but first you must do one thing for me. Go into the city and bring me back a single mustard seed from a house where no Wanano parent, no child, no spouse, no Savanthas ever died." The task seemed simple enough. Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gautami began her search. She went to the first house. "The Buddha has sent me to fetch a mustard seed for a medicine to save my son. Can you help me?" "Of course," the kind woman there replied, "we have plenty." As the woman went to get it, Kisa Gautami asked the crucial question, "Has anyone in this house ever died?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said, "you remind me of our deepest sorrow. We lost our beloved father just last year." Kisa Gautami moved to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Everyone was willing to give her the seed, but in every single family, there was a story of loss. One had lost a mother, another a husband, another a baby sister, another a cherished friend. As the day wore on, her frantic, personal grief began to transform. She was no longer just feeling her own pain. She was being immersed in the shared sorrow of all humanity. As dusk began to settle, she sat by the side of the road, looking out at the lights of the city, flickering on in the twilight. She watched them for a long time, how some burned brightly, some dimly, and how, one by one, they would eventually be extinguished. In that moment, the profound truth of the Buddha's lesson dawned on her. Death was not a unique tragedy that had struck only her. It was the universal, inescapable condition of life. It was as natural as the lights of the city being extinguished. She realized, "How selfish I have been in my grief." She took the body of her son to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, her heart broken, but also, for the first time, open. The Buddha had not given her a medicine to reverse death. He had given her a task that allowed her to discover the profound truth of Anicca for herself. And in that acceptance, her desperate, clinging thirst was released, and a deep, sober peace began to take its place. This is the liberating power of understanding impermanence. It is not a morbid doctrine of decay. It is a key that unlocks two of life's greatest treasures. The first is a profound appreciation for the present moment. If this moment is all there is, if it is fleeting and unrepeatable, it becomes infinitely precious. The flower is more beautiful because it will soon wilt. The time with a loved one is more poignant because it will not last forever. We stop taking life for granted. We stop living in the past or for the future, and we begin to truly inhabit the only time we ever have, which is now. The second treasure is hope. Anicca is our greatest ally in times of suffering. The pain you feel now, the heartbreak, the despair, the anxiety, is not a permanent state. It is a weather pattern that will pass. The oppressive situation at work, the period of darkness in your life, this too shall pass. nothing is forever. Knowing this does not magically remove the pain, but it gives us the strength to endure it, knowing that it is not a life sentence. Change is the only constant, and it works in our favor just as often as it works against our preferences. Understanding anicca is how we finally learn to open the monkey's fist. Why would we clench our hands so tightly around something we know is made of mist? It allows for a graceful and courageous letting go. We release our tight grip on outcomes, on people, on identities, on our own cherished opinions. We learn to hold our life with an open hand, appreciating things as they come and letting them go when they depart. We learn to dance with the ever-changing river of life. Instead of exhausting ourselves trying to build a dam, we see now that everything around us and within us is in constant flux. The body is a process, feelings are clouds, thoughts are sparks. This realization is freeing, but it also leads to the most profound and unsettling question of all. If everything is changing, then who or what is the permanent I that is observing this change? If my thoughts are not truly me because they come and go, if my feelings are not me and my body is not me, then who am I? To untangle this ultimate knot of identity, we must now turn to the most radical and transformative lesson on the path, the lesson of no self. We have journeyed through the great lessons of existence, seeing that life is marked by a fundamental unsatisfactoriness, a dukkha, which is caused by our thirst, our tanha, for things to be other than they are. We have seen that this thirst is futile, because the very nature of reality is one of constant, ceaseless change, or anicca. This cascade of insights leads us to the most profound, most challenging, and ultimately most liberating question a human being can ask. If everything is in flux, from the mountains and stars to my own body and thoughts, then who or what am I? What is this I that feels, that thinks, that experiences this changing world? The answer to this question is the third great lesson, the mark of existence known as anatta, often translated as no self or not self. This is perhaps the most radical teaching in all of spiritual history, and it is the master key that unlocks the final prison door of the ego. To be clear from the outset, anatta does not mean that you do not exist. It does not mean that you are a figment of the imagination or that nothing matters. You are here, reading these words, breathing, thinking. The teaching is far more subtle. It states that you do not exist as a separate, solid, continuous, and independent entity. The self that you believe to be the core of your being, the unchanging protagonist of your life story, cannot be found. What we call the self is not a thing, but a process. It is a temporary gathering of different elements, a convention, a useful label for a dynamic, ever-changing pattern of energy. To understand this, we can perform a gentle investigation, just as the Buddha instructed his followers to do. We can look for this self within our own experience. We can break down what we call me into its component parts, known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. If there is a permanent self, it must be found in one of these 5 areas. First, there is form. This is the physical body with all its parts and senses. Is this body me? It seems so at first glance. But as we saw with anicca, this body is in a state of constant flux. Billions of cells are dying and being replaced as you read this sentence. It ages, it gets sick, it feels pain, often against your will. If this body were truly yourself, you should have complete command over it. You should be able to command it. Do not age, or do not get sick, or do not feel pain, but you cannot. The body follows its own natural laws of arising, maturing, decaying, and dying. It is more like a vehicle you are temporarily inhabiting than a permanent self. It is something you have, not something you are. So, the self cannot be found in the body. Second, there are feelings or sensations. These are the raw data of our experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A pleasant sensation arises when you taste good food. An unpleasant one arises when you touch a hot stove. A neutral one might be the feeling of your clothes against your skin. Are these feelings me? We often act as if they are. We feel a surge of happiness and say, I am happy. We feel a wave of sadness and say, I am sad. But feelings are incredibly fleeting. They are like bubbles on the surface of water, appearing for a moment and then popping. If you were your feelings, you would cease to exist every time a feeling changed. A feeling is something that happens to you, or rather, something that arises in your awareness. It is not who you are. The self cannot be found in feelings. Third, there are perceptions. Perception is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, labels, and categorizes. It sees a shape and color and says, blue car. It hears a sound and says, bird singing. It feels a sensation and says, this is threatening or this is safe. Perception is heavily conditioned by our past experiences, our culture, our language, and our current mood. Two people can witness the exact same event and have wildly different perceptions of it. Is this labeling process the me? If it were, our self would be as unstable as the shifting interpretations of the world around us. Perception is a mental function, a tool we use. It is not a permanent self. Fourth, and perhaps most seductively, there are the mental formations. This is a broad category that includes all our volitional activities, our thoughts, opinions, beliefs, biases, habits, desires, and intentions. This is where most of us locate our identity. I am my thoughts, we believe. I am my personality, my values, my memories. But are these things a stable self? Think of an opinion you held 10 years ago that you no longer hold. Think of a habit you have changed. Our thoughts are a chaotic stream, often contradictory and nonsensical. Our personality is not a fixed thing, but a fluid pattern of behavior that adapts to different situations. These mental formations are just conditioned patterns, like trails that have been worn into the mind through repetition. They are not a solid, unchanging core. They are not the self. Fifth, and finally, there is consciousness. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the bare awareness that arises when a sense organ connects with a sense object. Eye consciousness arises when the eye meets a form. Ear consciousness arises when the ear meets a sound. We might think, aha, this awareness, this knowing, that is the real me. But even consciousness, in this teaching, is not a singular, continuous entity. It is a flickering series of moments. It is dependent. Eye consciousness cannot arise without an eye and a form. It is not an independent, all-powerful I that exists on its own. It is part of the process, co-arising with everything else. The self cannot be found here either. So where is the self? If it is not in the body, not in feelings, not in perceptions, not in mental formations, and not in consciousness, then it is nowhere to be found. The self is a story, a convenient label the mind creates by bundling these 5 changing processes together. It's a useful fiction for navigating the world, but a fiction nonetheless. And our suffering comes from believing this fiction is fact. The Zen tradition offers a powerful story to make this insight practical. A man is in his boat, rowing across a lake, shrouded in a thick, dense fog. He feels a sense of profound peace and solitude. Suddenly, with a loud thud, another boat crashes into his. His peace is shattered. Immediately, a hot surge of anger rises in him. He shouts into the fog, "You idiot! What's wrong with you? Watch where you're going." He is filled with righteous indignation, his mind creating a story about the careless, incompetent fool in the other boat. He feels his body tense, ready for a confrontation. As the current brings the 2 boats closer, he leans over to give the other rower a piece of his mind. And in that moment, he sees that the other boat is empty. It had simply broken free from its moorings. and was drifting aimlessly. In that instant, his anger vanishes completely. It evaporates as if it had never been. How can you be angry at an empty boat? The object of his rage was a phantom. His anger was not caused by the collision itself, but by his assumption that there was a someone in the other boat who was to blame. The profound lesson is this: what if the boat we are in, the very self that gets angry, is also an empty boat? When someone insults you, the words are like the collision. The anger arises because you believe there is a solid, important me inside who is being attacked. But what if this me is just a collection of the 5 aggregates, a temporary process, an empty boat drifting on the currents of cause and effect? When we see this clearly, the insult loses its target. The anger has nowhere to land. It arises, and seeing and status begins to subside. If there is no fixed self, what is there to fear in death? What dies is a process, a story, not a solid entity. This doesn't lead to nihilism or a cold detachment. On the contrary, when the illusion of a separate self dissolves, what remains is the reality of profound interconnection. We see that we are not separate islands, but waves in the same ocean. This is the very foundation of true compassion. We have now journeyed to the heart of the matter. We have seen that our dissatisfaction, our dukkha, is born from a deep thirst, our tanha. This thirst is futile because all of existence is marked by impermanence, anicca. And the I that is doing all this thirsting and suffering is itself not a solid thing, but a fluid process, an empty boat, a state of anatta. We have now explored these 3 great truths of existence. These are profound, powerful ideas. But how do we move from understanding them intellectually to experiencing them directly as a lived reality? How do we train our own minds to see this truth in every moment, not just in a philosophical discussion? To bridge the gap between theory and practice, between knowing the path and walking the path, we must now learn the fundamental tool of transformation. We must turn to the lesson of mindfulness. We have now traveled deep into the philosophical heart of this ancient path. We have been given a map of existence marked with 3 profound truths: the reality of dissatisfaction, or dukkha, the universal law of impermanence, or anicca, and the radical insight of no fixed, separate self, or anatta. We have seen that our suffering arises from a thirsting, clinging mind that protests against the fundamental nature of reality. This is the diagnosis. This is the theory. But a map is useless if you cannot find your own location on it. A medical diagnosis is only valuable if it leads to a treatment. How, then, do we bridge the vast gap between these intellectual concepts and the chaotic, messy, lived reality of our daily lives? The bridge is the practice, and the foundation of all practice on this path is the lesson of mindfulness. If anatta is the most radical teaching, mindfulness is the most practical. It is the tool, the method, the technology for bringing these truths from the realm of ideas into the laboratory of your own experience. In its simplest definition, mindfulness is the act of paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment. It sounds simple. It is anything but easy. It is, in fact, the work of a lifetime, and it begins with a single conscious breath. To understand what mindfulness is, it is helpful to first see what it is not. The default state of the human mind, what is sometimes called the monkey mind, is a state of near constant distraction. The mind swings wildly from branch to branch, from a memory of something that happened yesterday to a worry about something that might happen tomorrow. It rehearses conversations, replays old grievances, constructs elaborate fantasies, and generates endless commentary on everything it perceives. We spend the vast majority of our waking lives lost in this inner movie, suffering from events that are not actually happening, and missing the life that is unfolding right in front of us. The past is a memory, a ghost. The future is a projection, a dream. The only time we are ever truly alive, The only point where we have any power to act, to learn, or to love is right now. Mindfulness is the gentle, courageous, and repeated practice of returning to this now. How do we do this? We need an anchor. We need something that is always with us and always in the present moment. The most reliable and intimate anchor we have is the breath. The breath is not happening in the past or in the future. It is happening now. The practice can begin simply by closing your eyes and feeling the physical sensation of a single breath. Feel the air entering your nostrils, cool and dry. Feel the expansion of your chest and belly. Feel the slight pause at the top of the inhalation. Then, feel the gentle release, the warmth of the air as it leaves your body. That's it. You are not trying to breathe in a special way. You are not trying to achieve a mystical state. You are simply resting your attention on the raw, physical sensation of breathing. Inevitably, within a few seconds, your mind will wander. It will start thinking about your to-do list, or what you want for dinner, or a sound it just heard. This is not a failure. This is the moment the real practice begins. The moment you notice that your mind has wandered, you have just been mindful. And then, gently, without any scolding or judgment, you guide your attention back to the feeling of the next breath. This cycle of focusing, getting distracted, noticing the distraction, and gently returning is the essence of mindfulness meditation. It is a workout for the attention, building the mental muscle of presence. While the breath is a primary anchor, we can be mindful of anything. We can be mindful of the body, feeling the points of contact between your body and the chair, the sensation of your feet on the floor. We can be mindful of sounds, simply letting them wash through our awareness without labeling them as good or bad. A distant siren, the hum of a computer, the chirping of a bird all can become anchors to the present. The aim is to bring this quality of attention into daily life, to be fully present when you are drinking a cup of tea, feeling its warmth and tasting its flavor, rather than being lost in thought. A common misconception is that mindfulness is about emptying the mind or stopping thoughts. This leads to immense frustration for beginners who discover that their mind is a relentless thought-producing machine. The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to change your relationship to your thoughts. Imagine you are sitting on the bank of a river. The water, with all its currents, leaves, and debris, represents your stream of consciousness, your thoughts and feelings. Before mindfulness, you are in the river, being tossed and turned, completely identified with every current, believing you are the river. The practice of mindfulness is like learning to climb out of the water and sit peacefully on the bank. From the bank, you can still see the river. You see the angry thoughts flow by like muddy water. You see the happy thoughts drift past like sunlit leaves. You see the fears, the plans, the memories. But you are no longer swept away. You recognize that you are not the river. You are the witness of the river. You are the spacious, silent awareness in which the river of thought and feeling is flowing. In that space, between the observer and the observed, there is freedom. There is a powerful Zen parable that captures the essence of this teaching. A person is being chased by a ferocious tiger. They run as fast as they can until they reach the edge of a great cliff. With no other escape, they grab onto a thick vine and swing down over the abyss. As they hang there, they look up and see the tiger snarling at them from the cliff's edge. They look down and see another tiger waiting on the ground below. Their situation is utterly desperate. As they cling to the vine, their only support, they notice two mice, one white and one black, have emerged from a crevice and have begun to gnaw on the vine. The white mouse represents the day, and the black mouse represents the night. Time itself is eating away at their very hold on life. In this moment of ultimate peril with certain death above, certain death below, and the relentless passage of time devouring their only hope, the person happens to notice something, Growing from the cliff face, just within reach, is a small, wild strawberry. It is perfectly red and exquisitely ripe. They reach out a hand, pluck the strawberry from the vine, put it in their mouth, and savor it completely. The story ends simply, how sweet it tasted. This story is not about ignoring reality or pretending dangers don't exist. The tigers are real, the mice are real, but the story points to the profound capacity of the human spirit to find and inhabit the present moment, even in the midst of chaos and fear. The past is the tiger we are running from. The future is the tiger that awaits us. And time is always gnawing away at our life. But life itself is only ever lived right now. It is lived in the taste of the strawberry. Mindfulness is the practice of finding that strawberry in your own life. It is the ability to fully inhabit the sweetness of this present moment, whatever it holds. This is how mindfulness becomes the laboratory for discovering truth. As you sit and mindfully watch your thoughts, you see anicca with your own eyes, as each thought arises from nothing and vanishes back into nothing. As you observe your feelings, you see dukkha, the subtle stress and unsatisfactoriness that underlies even pleasant moments. And as you look for the permanent thinker behind the thoughts or the feeler behind the feelings, you experience anatta. You find only the processes, only the flowing river, only the empty boat. The three marks of existence cease to be a philosophy and become your direct, undeniable experience. Mindfulness, then, is not another task to add to your to-do list. It is a radical act of love and sanity. It is the gentle but firm practice of coming home, again and again, to the only moment you will ever have. It is the tool that allows us to stop being a prisoner of our own minds and to become, instead, a curious and compassionate observer of their passing show. Through mindfulness, we develop the capacity to be present with our experience, just as it is. But this is only the beginning. What do we do when what we find in the present moment is something we desperately wish wasn't there? It is one thing to be mindful of a sweet strawberry, but another thing entirely to be mindful of raw fear, searing anger, or profound grief. To walk this path fully, we need more than just awareness. We need a new kind of strength. We must now learn the lesson of acceptance. Through the practice of mindfulness, we learn to bring a clear, steady attention to the present moment. We learn to sit on the riverbank and watch the stream of our experience flow by. This is a profound first step, but it inevitably leads us to a great challenge. What happens when the river is not flowing peacefully? What do we do when the water is a raging, muddy torrent of fear, or a stagnant, murky pool of grief, or a fiery current of anger? The mind's immediate, deeply conditioned reflex is to resist. It wants to push the unpleasant feeling away, numb it, deny its existence, or escape into distraction. This is where mindfulness requires a courageous companion. This is where we must learn the lesson of acceptance. Like the other great truths of this path, the word acceptance is easily misunderstood. To our modern ears, it can sound like weakness, passivity, or resignation. It can imply a fatalistic surrender, a condoning of harmful behavior, or an abandonment of any effort to improve our lives. This, however, is not its meaning. In this context, acceptance is not a passive act, but a profoundly wise and courageous one. It is the simple, sane, and powerful act of acknowledging reality as it is, without wasting our precious life force in a futile war against it. It is the conscious choice to stop arguing with what has already happened, or what is already here. The most crucial distinction to understand is that acceptance is not the same as agreement or approval. You can accept that it is raining without approving of the rain or wanting your picnic to be cancelled. You simply acknowledge the fact it is raining. This acknowledgement is the necessary first step to deciding what to do next, whether to get an umbrella, wait inside, or dance in the puddles. If you spend your energy railing against the sky, shouting, "It shouldn't be raining," you achieve nothing but your own frustration. You become soaked and miserable, not by the rain, but by your resistance to it. This applies to every difficult circumstance in our lives. To accept that you have a serious illness does not mean you like the illness, or that you will not seek the best possible treatment. It means you first stop wasting time and energy on denial, blame, or magical thinking. You start from a place of clear-eyed reality. This is the situation. Now, what is the wisest course of action? To accept that a cherished relationship has ended does not mean you condone the reasons for its end, or that you deny the pain of your heartbreak. It means you stop torturing yourself by endlessly replaying the past, wishing things were different, and fighting a battle that is already over. You accept the reality of the loss, which is the only ground from which true healing can begin. Acceptance is the firm, sober foundation upon which all wise action is built. In fact, this resistance to reality is the very definition of the second arrow we spoke of earlier. The first arrow is the painful event itself. The second arrow, the one that causes the true suffering, is the thought, "This shouldn't be." That thought, that mental protest, is a declaration of war on reality, and reality always wins. The energy we expend in this internal battle is immense. It is the energy of clenching, of tightening, of bracing against the flow of life. It's like trying to hold back the ocean tide with your bare hands. It is utterly exhausting, and it is the very essence of dukkha. To practice acceptance is to consciously choose to lay down your arms in this unwinnable war. It is to stop firing the second arrow. How then do we practice this? Like mindfulness, acceptance is not just an idea, it is an embodied skill. It is something we learn by doing, especially when faced with difficult emotions. When a wave of fear or sadness arises, our instinct is to suppress it or run from it. The practice of acceptance invites us to do something radical, to turn towards it. The first step is to recognize it with mindfulness. Ah, this is fear, or sadness is here. Simply naming it begins to separate us from it. The second step is to consciously allow it to be there. We give it permission to exist, just for this moment. We might say to ourselves internally, "Fear, you are welcome here for now. There is space for you." This is a revolutionary act. Instead of fighting the feeling, we create a space of hospitality for it in our awareness. The third step is to investigate it with gentle curiosity. Where do I feel this fear in my body? Is it a tightness in the chest? A hollowness in the stomach? Is it hot or cold? Does it have a color or a texture? We are not analyzing its story, but exploring its raw physical sensation. This shifts our perspective from being consumed by the fear to being a compassionate observer of the fear. We are no longer the victim of the emotion. We are the spacious, kind awareness that holds it. We are the sky, and the fear is just a passing cloud. A beautiful Zen story illustrates the power of this principle. A master was walking by a river when he saw a scorpion that had fallen in and was struggling, about to drown. The master reached down to scoop it up and save it. As he lifted the scorpion, it stung his hand. He recoiled in pain, dropping the scorpion back into the water. Seeing it still struggling, he reached down again to save it, and again, it stung him. A bystander who had been watching this unfold finally asked, "Master, are you a fool? Why do you keep trying to save that creature? It is its nature to sting you." The master looked at his swollen hand, and then at the man and replied, "It is the scorpion's nature to sting. It is my nature to be compassionate. Why should I abandon my nature simply because of the scorpion's nature?" This story is a profound teaching on acceptance. The master is not naive. He is not surprised or angry that the scorpion stings him. He accepts its nature completely. He doesn't wish the scorpion were a butterfly. He doesn't condemn it for being what it is. His acceptance of reality is so total that it frees him to act from his own deepest principles, rather than simply reacting to external stimuli. He is not controlled by the scorpion's sting. He is guided by his own compassion. This is the ultimate freedom that acceptance provides. It allows us to act with unwavering integrity and kindness, no matter how much the world may sting us. This reveals the final, crucial truth about acceptance. It is not the end of action, but the beginning of wise and effective action. When we are locked in a state of resistance and denial, our actions are reactive, blind, and often counterproductive. We lash out in anger, we freeze in fear, we sink into despair. But when we accept a situation fully, the mind becomes calm and clear. The enormous amount of energy we were wasting in our internal fight is now liberated. From this place of calm clarity, we can finally ask the most important question. Given that this is the situation, what is the most skillful and compassionate response? From acceptance comes clarity. From clarity comes wisdom. And from wisdom comes action that heals rather than harms. Acceptance is not a passive surrender to fate. It is a courageous and intelligent embrace of truth. It is the act of making peace with what is, and in doing so, discovering a source of profound strength and tranquility within ourselves. It is the rich, fertile soil in which the seeds of wisdom and compassion can finally take root and grow. Now that we have this powerful tool of acceptance, let us turn to one of life's most fiercely resisted experiences, a first arrow that so often triggers a hailstorm of second arrows. How can we apply this wisdom to the painful, often public, experience of failure? To navigate this territory with grace, we must now explore the lesson from failure, with the strength gained from mindfulness and the wisdom of acceptance. We are now equipped to face some of life's more challenging teachers. And few teachers are as direct, as humbling, and as universally feared as failure. In a culture obsessed with success, achievement, and flawless presentation, failure is often seen as the ultimate catastrophe, a verdict on our worthlessness, a source of deep and abiding shame. We are taught to avoid it at all costs. But from the perspective of this ancient path, failure is not an enemy to be avoided. It is an indispensable part of our curriculum. It is not the opposite of success, but a crucial stepping stone upon the path to it, and more importantly, upon the path to wisdom. The first truth we must understand is that the fear of failure is almost always more painful and more damaging than failure itself. The event of Phalinga project at work falls through, a business closes, a relationship ends. An exam is not passed as a first arrow. It can be painful, disappointing, and have real-world consequences. But the true suffering, the thick, heavy cloak of misery, comes from the storm of second arrows we fire at ourselves in its wake. It comes from the story we tell ourselves about what the failure means. We take a single event and we generalize it into a global statement about our identity. I failed, therefore, I am a failure. I made a mistake, therefore, I am stupid. We fuse the event with our sense of self, and this is the source of its terrifying power. This fear keeps us playing small. It cages us in the prison of the familiar, dissuading us from taking the very risks that are necessary for growth, creativity, and a life fully lived. The quiet regret of a life unlived, of chances not taken due to fear, is a far heavier burden than any single failure could ever be. The lesson of failure invites us to perform a radical shift in perspective, to view it not as a verdict, but as data. Imagine a scientist conducting an experiment in a laboratory. If the experiment does not produce the expected result, the scientist does not collapse in a heap of shame and declare themselves a worthless scientist. They do not see it as a personal failure. They see it as valuable information. The result simply tells them, this particular hypothesis is not correct, or this method does not work. This failure is essential. It narrows the field of inquiry and points the way toward a more fruitful path. It is purely feedback. We must learn to approach our own lives with this same spirit of curious, impersonal investigation. A failed business venture is not a judgment on your character. It is feedback on your business model, your market, or your strategy. A difficult conversation that goes poorly is not proof that you are unlovable. It is feedback on your communication style or your choice of timing. When we can strip away the emotional charge and the story of self-blame, what remains is priceless information, a clear indication of where we need to learn, adapt, and grow. Success, ironically, is often a poor teacher. When things go well, we rarely pause to analyze why. We simply enjoy the outcome. Success can reinforce our existing habits, both good and bad, and it can inflate the ego, making us less open and more complacent. Failure, on the other hand, is a ruthless and brilliant instructor. It shatters our illusions. It mercilessly exposes our blind spots, our unexamined assumptions, our areas of arrogance, and the precise edges of our competence. It forces us to become humble, to ask for help, to reevaluate our approach. It tills the soil of our character, breaking up the hard, compacted earth of our pride so that new seeds of wisdom can take root. In Japan, there is an art form that offers a breathtakingly beautiful metaphor for this process. It is called kintsugi, which means to join with gold. When a cherished piece of pottery, a bowl, or a cup is broken, it is not thrown away. It is seen as an opportunity. Master craftsmen take the broken pieces and meticulously glue them back together using a special lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The philosophy behind this art is not to hide the damage, but to illuminate it. The cracks are not disguised. They are emphasized, traced in brilliant gold, becoming the most striking feature of the piece. The break and its repair are treated as a vital part of the object's history, a testament to its journey. The finished piece is considered more beautiful, more valuable, and stronger than the original, flawless object. Its history of brokenness is the source of its unique and profound beauty. This is the lesson of failure. We are all like that ceramic bowl. We will all, at times, be broken by life. We will fail, we will be heartbroken, we will fall. Our instinct is to hide these broken parts, to cover them up in shame, to pretend they never happened. But the practice of kintsugi for the soul invites us to do the opposite. It asks us to gather our broken pieces with care. It asks us to mend ourselves with the gold of mindful self-compassion and the clear light of wisdom. When we do this, our cracks, our failures, our scars do not have to be sources of shame. They become the markers of our resilience, the proof of our courage, the story of our growth. They can become the most beautiful and strongest parts of who we are. We become stronger at the broken places. How do we practice this in the heat of the moment? When the sting of failure is fresh, the first step is to use the tools of mindfulness and acceptance. Acknowledge the first arrow, the raw pain of disappointment, embarrassment, or loss. Don't deny it or pretend you don't feel it. Create a space for that feeling to exist without judgment. The second step is to watch vigilantly for the second arrows. Notice the mind's habit of spinning stories of blame and shame. I'm a fraud. I always mess things up. Everyone is going to think I'm an idiot. Recognize these as just thoughts conditioned, habitual, and not necessarily true. Let them float by like clouds without identifying with them. Then, when the emotional storm has passed and some clarity returns, you can move to the third step, extracting the lesson. With genuine, non-judgmental curiosity, you can ask, what is the feedback here? What was the false assumption I was operating under? What skill needs to be developed? What does this teach me about my own patterns? This is a kind, forward-looking inquiry, not an exercise in self-flagellation. And finally, the fourth step is to let go. Once you have learned the lesson, You release your attachment to the event itself. You forgive yourself. You integrate the wisdom, and you begin again. Every moment is a new opportunity to start, armed with the knowledge gained from the past, but not burdened by it. Failure, then, is not the opposite of a spiritual life. It is central to it. It is the great dissolver of the ego. It is the ultimate teacher of humility. When we learn to reframe our relationship with it, we unlock one of the most powerful sources of growth available to us. We learn that true strength is not about never falling down. It is about how we get back up. It is about our willingness to be broken and our courage to mend ourselves with gold. This process of working with failure, however, often unearths very powerful and volatile emotions. When our efforts are thwarted or our ego is bruised, the raw energy of anger frequently erupts. This energy can be incredibly destructive, but like failure, it too holds a potent lesson. How do we learn to work with this inner fire without getting burned? To understand this, we must now turn to the lesson found within anger and conflict. Having explored the humbling landscape of failure, we now turn to one of its most common and volatile companions, the fiery energy of anger. In our journey towards inner peace, anger often feels like the ultimate obstacle. It is a powerful, consuming, and often destructive force that can feel antithetical to any notion of spiritual practice. We are taught that to be spiritual is to be serene, to be kind, to be above such base emotions. And so, when anger inevitably arises, we judge it, we suppress it, or we act it out in ways that cause harm to ourselves and others, creating a cycle of regret and further conflict. The lesson of anger, however, asks us to do something far more radical. It asks us to re-examine our relationship with this powerful energy, to see it not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a misunderstood messenger, a source of heat that can either burn down the house or provide the warmth and light for profound transformation. Think of anger as fire. An uncontrolled wildfire is a terrifying, destructive force, consuming everything in its path. This is what anger feels like when it possesses us completely, when we are lost in its flames. It burns through relationships, ruins careers, and scorches our own inner landscape, leaving behind only the ash of regret. But fire itself is not evil. Contained within a proper hearth, fire provides warmth, cooks our food, and gives light in the darkness. It is a tool for transformation, capable of turning raw ore into tempered steel. The task of a wise person is not to extinguish all fire, but to learn how to build a hearth. The practice of working with anger is the practice of building a hearth within our own hearts. The first step is to understand that anger is information. It is a powerful signal, a primal alarm bell that rings when we perceive a threat, an injustice, or a violation of our deeply held values or boundaries. It surges with energy because its evolutionary purpose is to empower us to protect ourselves. When we simply label anger as bad and try to stamp it out, we lose access to the vital information it carries. We fail to ask, what boundary has been crossed? What deep need is not being met? What injustice am I perceiving? The lesson is not to be driven by the raw, blind energy of the alarm, but to hear its message clearly and then choose how to respond with wisdom. So, how do we build this hearth? How do we work with the fire when it begins to burn? The practice starts with mindfulness, bringing a particular quality of courage and care to this intense energy. When you feel the heat of anger begin to rise, the first step is a simple, non-judgmental acknowledgement. Anger is here, not I am angry, which fuses our identity with the emotion, but simply, anger is present in me now. This creates a sliver of space. The second step is to immediately drop your attention out of the story in your head, the story of who is to blame and what they did wrong, and into the raw, physical sensations in your body. Where is the fire located? Is it a tightening in your jaw, a burning sensation in your chest, a surge of heat in your face and neck, clenched fists, a pounding heart. By focusing on these impersonal, physical sensations, you begin to see anger for what it is, a powerful but temporary pattern of energy flowing through you. You are observing the weather, not becoming the storm. The third step is to breathe. With each inhalation, imagine you are breathing space and kindness into the tight, hot areas of your body. With each exhalation, imagine a gentle softening, a release. You are not trying to force the anger to go away. You are doing the opposite. You are allowing it to be there, but you are holding it in a vast, compassionate container of awareness. You are building the hearth around the fire, giving it space to burn without letting it leap out and consume you. Once there is some measure of calm, a fourth step becomes possible. You can look with curiosity at the thoughts fueling the fire. He shouldn't have done that. She always disrespects me. You can see these thoughts for what they are: second arrows, mental commentary, and you can choose not to believe them as absolute truth. In this space between the raw energy and the inflammatory story, choice is born. Of course, conflict often involves the anger of others. How do we respond when someone else's fire is raging at us? Here, we must revisit the wisdom of the empty boat. When another person is shouting, consumed by rage, their words are the sparks from their own uncontrolled fire. Their suffering has overflowed and is trying to set you ablaze. While you may have been the trigger, the first arrow, their intense emotional reaction, their suffering is their own. Seeing this allows for a profound act of non-personalization. You realize their anger is not truly about you. It is about their own pain, their own history, their own unmet needs. This insight can transform you from being a defensive target to being a compassionate, though not necessarily compliant, witness. You understand that their boat is not being steered by a rational actor, but is adrift, filled with the flames of their own suffering. This doesn't mean you must tolerate abusive behavior, but it allows you to set boundaries from a place of calm clarity rather than reactive fear or counter-anger. Our tendency to hold on to anger long after an event has passed is one of our greatest sources of self-inflicted pain. A timeless Zen story illustrates this perfectly. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were traveling together. They came to a wide river with a strong current. A beautiful young woman stood at the bank, hesitating, afraid to cross. The monks of their order were bound by strict vows forbidding them from touching women. The junior monk stood by his vows. The senior monk, however, seeing the woman's distress, simply walked over, lifted her in his arms, carried her across the churning river, and set her down gently on the other side. She thanked him profusely, and he nodded and continued his journey. The junior monk was aghast. For the next several hours, as they walked on, he was consumed by a silent, simmering rage. His mind was a storm of judgmental thoughts about the senior monk's shocking transgression. He replayed the scene over and over, his indignation growing with every step. Finally, miles down the road, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst out, "How could you do that? How could you break our sacred vows and touch that woman?" The senior monk looked at his agitated companion with a calm, gentle smile. "Brother," he said, "I left that woman back at the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? This story is a mirror for our own minds. An event happens. It is over in moments, yet we refuse to leave it at the riverbank. We pick it up, we carry it with us, and we allow the poison of resentment to seep into our own hearts for hours, days, or even years. The practice is to learn to let go. When conflict is over, we must learn to leave it where it happened, rather than allowing it to become a toxic burden we carry into our present moment. When engagement in a conflict is necessary, we can use the tools of deep listening and loving speech. Deep listening is the practice of hearing someone not to form a rebuttal, but to truly understand their suffering. Often, the simple, compassionate act of being fully heard is enough to extinguish another person's fire. Loving speech is the art of speaking our own truth, but with profound kindness, using words that do not blame or accuse, but instead express our own feelings and needs. Anger is not a sin to be eradicated, but a teacher to be honored. It calls for our mindfulness, our courage, and our compassion. By learning to build a hearth for our own fire and to see the suffering behind the fire of others, we can transform the destructive flames of conflict into a source of warmth, connection, and deep understanding. This journey through anger, however, often involves the pain of separation and things that cannot be mended. This brings us to one of the most tender and profound human experiences. How do we navigate the immense landscape of sorrow that follows a great loss? To find our way through this sacred darkness, we must now turn to the lesson found in grief. From the fiery landscape of anger and conflict, our path now leads us into a different terrain, one that is quieter, more tender, and often shrouded in a sacred darkness. This is the lesson found in loss and grief. If our journey is about learning to be with reality as it is, then loss is our most profound and uncompromising teacher. It is the ultimate, non-negotiable first arrow, the death of a loved one, the end of a cherished dream, the loss of our health or home. These events confront us with a reality that cannot be bargained with, fixed, or denied. They bring us to our knees. And in that space of surrender, a strange and holy process begins. One our culture teaches us to fear, but which this path invites us to honor. That process is grief. We must begin by understanding that grief is not a problem to be solved. It is not a disease to be cured or a psychological disorder to be managed. Grief is a natural, healthy, and intelligent response to loss. In the simplest terms, grief is the form that love takes when the object of its love is gone. The pain we feel is a testament to the depth of our connection. To deny our grief, to numb it, or to rush through it is to dishonor the love that gave it birth. Our modern world, however, is deeply uncomfortable with this truth. It treats grief as an inconvenience, a messy and unpredictable process that should be contained and gotten over as quickly as possible. We are told to be strong, to keep busy, to move on. We are offered platitudes that try to pave over the vast crater of our loss. But this pressure to suppress our sorrow is a form of violence against the soul. Unexpressed grief does not disappear. It goes underground, where it hardens into bitterness, festers as depression, or manifests as unexplained anger or physical illness. The only way to heal from grief is to be willing to grieve. The path of acceptance asks us not to control our grief, but to attend to it. It asks us to create a safe and compassionate space for this wild and sacred energy to move through us. Grief is not a linear progression of stages. It is a landscape. It has seasons. There will be raging storms of anger and sorrow, long, desolate winters of numbness and despair, and unexpected, sun-drenched moments of peace and sweet remembrance. Our task is to walk this landscape with courage and patience, allowing ourselves to feel what we feel, without judging our journey or comparing it to anyone else's. This is a practice of profound self-compassion. It is the act of listening with the ear of the heart to our own deepest pain. The story of Kisa Gautami, which we visited earlier, is the quintessential teaching on the alchemical power of grief. Let us look at it now through this new lens. Her initial grief, upon the death of her only child, is frantic, private, and isolating. It is the cry of me and my loss. She believes she has been singled out by the universe for a uniquely cruel punishment. Her pain separates her from the world, enclosing her in a bubble of desperate agony. When she goes to the Buddha, he, in his immense wisdom, does not offer her a lecture on impermanence. He gives her a task. He sends her on a journey to find a single mustard seed from a house that has never known death. This journey is a form of moving meditation. As she goes from door to door, her personal, isolating sorrow is forced to encounter the universal, shared sorrow of all humanity. In one house, she hears of a lost husband. In another, a beloved parent. In a third, a child, just like her own. Her personal story begins to dissolve into the much larger story of the human condition. Her heart, clenched tight around her own pain, begins to soften and open. The turning point comes as she sits at dusk, watching the lamps of the city being lit, only to flicker and die out. In that moment, her grief is transformed. It is no longer a tight, selfish knot of my pain. It expands into a vast, compassionate understanding of our pain. She sees that loss is the thread that connects all beings. Her heart breaks, but it breaks open, not apart. She is initiated into the family of those who have loved and lost, which is to say, the family of all humanity. This is the sacred alchemy of grief. It can transmute personal pain into universal compassion. Loss is one of life's most direct and potent teachers. First and foremost, it is the ultimate instructor in anicca, impermanence. We can understand impermanence as a concept, but it is in the searing reality of loss that we feel its truth in our very bones. It shatters our childish illusion that the people and things we love will be with us forever. This shattering, while excruciating, is also a spiritual opening. It forces us to confront what truly matters, to reevaluate our priorities, and to let go of our attachment to the trivial. Grief is also a teacher of connection. In our ordinary lives, we walk around encased in the armor of our ego, our identities, our roles. Grief shatters that armor. It makes us raw, vulnerable, and utterly authentic. In this state of openness, a new kind of intimacy becomes possible. When we have the courage to share our sorrow, we give others permission to share theirs, and we discover that our pain, far from being a source of isolation, is a bridge that connects our heart to others. Most importantly, grief is the teacher of love. The pain of absence is a direct measure of the beauty of presence. We often don't realize the full depth of our love until we are faced with its loss. To walk through the valley of grief is to trace the contours of our own love. By honoring our grief, we are honoring the love itself. We are saying that the connection was real, that it mattered, and that its absence leaves a sacred space in our lives. The goal, then, is not to get over grief, as if it were a fence to be jumped. The goal is to learn to carry it. It becomes a part of who we are. The sharp, jagged edges of initial loss are slowly, over years, smoothed by the river of time and tears. The pain becomes less acute, but the love remains. The grief transforms into a quiet, tender ache, a bittersweet companion that reminds us of the beauty of what was and informs our life with a deeper sense of meaning. It becomes the stone in our pocket that we touch from time to time, a reminder of the precious, fleeting nature of all things. Grief is not a detour from the spiritual path. For many, it is the path itself. It is a holy ground, an initiation into the deepest mysteries of love, loss, and impermanence. By allowing ourselves to grieve fully, with honesty and with boundless self-compassion, we do not simply recover from a wound, we are transformed by it. We become larger, more tender, more wise, and more fully human. After the great storm of loss, life, in its insistence, continues. The dramatic peaks of joy and the deep valleys of sorrow are, for most of us, infrequent. The vast majority of our existence is spent on the great plains in between the realm of the routine, the familiar, the mundane. How do we find meaning and presence in these quiet, unspectacular moments that make up the bulk of our lives? To discover the sacred in the ordinary, we must now turn to the lesson found in boredom. Our journey has taken us through the dramatic landscapes of the human heart, through failure, anger, and the sacred darkness of grief. These are the great mountains and valleys of our experience. But most of life is not lived in these extremes. The vast majority of our days are spent not on the peak or in the abyss, but on the great, flat, seemingly unremarkable plains of the ordinary. This is the realm of routine, of repetition, of the mundane tasks that make up the fabric of our existence. And in our modern world, which relentlessly peddles novelty and stimulation, this ordinary landscape is often given a name: boredom. Boredom is seen as an enemy, a void to be filled at all costs, a sign that our life is not interesting enough. We reach for our phones, we turn on the television, we seek any distraction to escape the discomfort of a moment that isn't entertaining us. But what if boredom is not an enemy? What if, like all the other challenging states we have explored, it is a teacher in disguise, a gateway to a depth of presence we can't find anywhere else? To understand the lesson of the mundane, we must first dissect the experience of boredom itself. Boredom is not a state of nothing happening. Things are always happening. The breath is breathing, the heart is beating, sensations are arising and passing away. Boredom is a state of active mental resistance to what is happening. It is the mind's judgment that the present moment is not good enough. It is a form of tanha, the thirst for a different reality, a more stimulating experience. This constant craving for novelty, fed by a culture of endless distraction, has made us skim the surface of our own lives. We have become connoisseurs of the appetizer, but we rarely stay for the main course of the present moment. We are experts at starting things, but we lack the patience and focus to go deep. The lesson of the mundane invites us to stop skimming, to put down the distractions, and to discover the universe that exists in a single, ordinary moment. The radical proposal of this path is that the most mundane aspects of our lives are not obstacles to our spiritual practice. They are the practice. The kitchen sink, the morning commute, the office cubicle, these are our monasteries. The repetitive tasks of daily life are our sacred rituals, if we choose to treat them as such. Think of washing the dishes. For most of us, this is a chore to be rushed through, while our mind is somewhere else entirely planning the next day, replaying a conversation, lost in a daydream. But what if you were to wash the dishes as if it were the most important thing in the world? What if you were to feel the warmth of the water on your hands, to see the iridescent shimmer of the soap bubbles, to hear the sound of the plate being rinsed clean, to feel the smooth texture of the ceramic? When you bring your full, undivided attention to this simple act, the chore is transformed into a meditation. The Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh, taught that if we are incapable of washing the dishes mindfully, we will be incapable of drinking our tea mindfully. The quality of our attention in the small moments determines the quality of our entire life. This can be applied to anything. When you walk, you can practice walking meditation, feeling with immense curiosity the sensation of your foot lifting, moving through space, and connecting with the earth. Each step becomes a miracle of coordination and presence. When you drink a cup of tea, you can experience it fully, its aroma, its warmth, its flavor, instead of gulping it down while checking your email. These are not trivial exercises. They are profound practices in concentration, patience, and gratitude. They train the mind to find satisfaction not in what is happening, but in the quality of attention we bring to what is happening. They teach us that there is more depth, texture, and wonder in a single ordinary moment than in 1,000 hours of distraction. There is a famous Zen story that beautifully illustrates this point. A young, earnest seeker of truth had spent years on his quest. He had traveled across mountains and rivers, studied complex scriptures, and practiced many austerities, all in the hope of finding enlightenment. At last, he arrived at the monastery of a renowned and deeply respected Zen master. After being granted an audience, the young man prostrated himself before the master and pleaded, "Master, I have traveled so long and have given up everything to find the ultimate truth. Please, I beg you, Bestow upon me your highest, most profound teaching." The old master looked at him with clear, calm eyes and asked a simple question. "Have you eaten your rice porridge this morning?" The seeker, taken aback by the mundane question, replied, "Yes, master, I have." The master then said with an air of finality, "Then go and wash your bowl." The young man was devastated. He had come seeking a cosmic secret, a powerful mantra, a complex philosophical doctrine, and he was told to do the dishes. But this, in fact, was the highest teaching. The master was pointing him directly away from the abstract and conceptual and back to the immediate, unfinished reality of his own life. The secret is that there is no secret. The path is not out there somewhere in a future state of enlightenment. The path is right here, right now, in the simple, wholehearted and mindful engagement with the task at hand. The path is washing your own bowl. This leads us to another celebrated Zen aphorism. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. This koan reveals a crucial truth. The spiritual path does not necessarily lead to a life of extraordinary outer circumstances. The daily tasks remain. We still have to work, pay our bills, do our laundry, and navigate our relationships. The world does not magically rearrange itself to our liking. The transformation is entirely internal. Before enlightenment, one might chop wood and carry water, but all the while, the mind is filled with striving, with desire, with the thought, "If only I were enlightened, I wouldn't have to do this." There is a division between the task and the goal. After enlightenment, the division collapses. One simply chops wood, one simply carries water. The action becomes complete in itself, infused with a quiet dignity, a profound presence, a sense of peace that does not depend on the nature of the activity. Life itself becomes the meditation. The antidote to boredom, then, is not more stimulation. It is deeper attention. When you are willing to look at anything with sustained, curious, and open-hearted awareness, it becomes fascinating. The intricate pattern on a leaf, the way light falls across a room, the subtle shifts in a child's expression, the world reveals its hidden beauty to those who are willing to be present for it. The search for meaning and peace does not require us to flee our ordinary lives for a remote hermitage. The hermitage is right here, in our own kitchen, in our daily commute, in our relationships. By bringing mindfulness to the mundane, we transform routine into ritual. We turn boredom into a gateway for profound presence. And we come to the liberating realization that there are, in fact, no ordinary moments. This practice of finding peace in the present is powerful, but it is often sabotaged by the mind's relentless habit of leaping into the future. The dissatisfaction of a mundane moment frequently triggers a cascade of planning, worrying, and fantasizing about what is to come. This mental time travel is the very engine of anxiety. How do we learn to quiet this inner turmoil and learn to trust the path as it unfolds? To address this constant pull of tomorrow, we must now explore the lesson from anxiety about the future. Having learned to find a quiet dignity in the mundane, we must now confront one of the mind's most powerful and persistent habits, a habit that pulls us out of the serene reality of the present and throws us into a turbulent, imaginary world. This is the habit of living in the future, and the emotional weather of this imaginary place is almost always the same: a low-pressure system of worry, a thick fog of dread, a sudden storm of panic. This is the lesson from anxiety. Anxiety is not a personal failing or a sign of a defective character. It is the natural consequence of a mind that has forgotten how to live in its own home, the present moment, and has instead taken up residence in a land that does not exist. To understand how to work with anxiety, we must first become familiar with its anatomy. It almost always begins with two small, seductive words. What if? These two words, are the seeds from which entire forests of suffering grow. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if my children get into trouble? What if I say the wrong thing at the meeting? The mind takes this seed of a thought and, like a frantic movie director, immediately begins to produce a feature-length film of disaster. It doesn't just think the thought, it creates a vivid, detailed narrative, complete with scenes, dialogue, and a catastrophic ending. Here is the crucial insight. Your body does not know that this movie is a work of fiction. As your mind plays out the scenario of losing your job, your body responds as if you are actually being threatened right now. The adrenal glands fire, the heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow and rapid, muscles clench, and a wave of cortisol floods your system. You are, in a very real, physiological sense, living through a disaster that has not happened and, in all likelihood, never will. This is the exhausting, debilitating experience of anxiety. We are spending our precious, present moment energy fighting ghosts, fleeing from phantoms of our own creation. We are suffering deeply from events that are not real. The antidote to this mental time travel is breathtakingly simple in its instruction, though it requires immense patience to practice. The only cure for living in the future is to come back to the present. The anxious future is a story. The present moment is a fact. The practice is to gently but firmly unhook your attention from the fiction and anchor it in fact. The most reliable facts are the raw sensations of your body. When the mind begins its what-if spiral, the instruction is to bring your full attention to the feeling of your breath. Feel the simple, undeniable reality of the air entering your body and the air leaving your body. This breath is real. The story about tomorrow is not. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet. Your feet on the floor right now is a fact. The disastrous meeting next week is a fiction. To feel the weight of your body in the chair. This sensation is happening now. The catastrophic illness you might get in 10 years is not. By repeatedly grounding your awareness in the tangible, undeniable reality of the present moment, you are cutting the fuel line to the engine of anxiety. You are not fighting the anxious thoughts. You are simply withdrawing the one thing they need to survive, your belief in them. The great Zen master Hakuin told a story that powerfully illustrates how we create our own inner states in the present moment. A famously fierce and proud samurai warrior came to him and demanded, "Tell me, old monk, do heaven and hell truly exist?" Hakuin looked him up and down with an expression of utter disdain. "Why would a clumsy, oafish, pathetic-looking lout like you even ask?" he sneered. "Your sword looks as dull as your wits. You are a disgrace to the samurai class." The samurai's face turned purple with rage. His pride shattered. He let out a roar and drew his magnificent sword, raising it high, ready to cut the monk down. In that instant, as the blade was about to fall, Hakuin pointed a calm finger at the warrior and said softly, "Here, open the gates of hell." The samurai, a man disciplined in martial arts, was shocked into a moment of perfect clarity. He instantly understood. His own uncontrolled anger, his own reactive mind, had created a living hell right there on the spot. Overcome with gratitude and humility, he immediately sheathed his sword and bowed deeply to the master. Hakuin smiled gently. "And here," he said, "open the gates of heaven." The lesson is profound. Heaven and hell are not future destinations. They are states of mind, available to us in every moment. Hell is a mind consumed by its own fire, anger, hatred, greed, and fear. Heaven is a mind that is clear, compassionate, and at peace. The torment of anxiety is one of these self-created hells. It is the suffering we inflict upon ourselves now because of our fearful thoughts about the future. The freedom, the heaven, is found by letting go of the story and returning to the simple, unadorned peace of this present moment. This practice of returning to the now must be supported by a deeper shift in our worldview, from a need for control to an attitude of trust. We obsessively plan and worry about the future because, at our core, we do not trust our ability to handle it when it arrives. We try to mentally solve all of tomorrow's potential problems today. But this is impossible. We are trying to fight a whole army of ghosts at once. The path invites us to cultivate what is known as shraddha, or trust. This is not a blind faith that everything will work out exactly as we want. It is a quiet, resilient confidence in our own inner resources. It is the trust that when the future finally arrives and becomes the present, we will have the capacity to meet it. It is the trust that the same awareness, courage, and compassion we are learning to bring to this moment will be available to us in that moment. We develop this trust not by thinking about it, but by practicing, by meeting each small moment of the present day with mindfulness and care. This trust allows us to do something truly radical, to embrace uncertainty. Our craving for certainty is a form of tanha, a thirst for control over a universe that is fundamentally uncontrollable, wild, and unpredictable. Making peace with this truth is a source of immense liberation. We stop trying to write the script for the rest of our lives and instead learn to become skillful improvisers, gracefully working with whatever each new scene brings. We accept that we cannot control the weather of the future, so we focus on building a sturdy and peaceful shelter within ourselves. Anxiety is the heavy price we pay for leaving the solid ground of the present moment. The way back is not through more intricate planning or more desperate attempts at control. It is through the simple, repeated, and compassionate act of returning to the anchor of the breath, the body, and the senses. It is the practice of cultivating a deep and abiding trust in our ability to meet the great mystery of the unknown. We learn to inhabit our lives as they actually are, in this very moment, not as we fear they might one day become. This incessant projection into the future is often fueled by a powerful engine in our culture, the belief that our security and happiness depend on what we can acquire and achieve. We worry about the future because we believe we need to accumulate more things, more money, and more status to finally be safe and content. This brings us face to face with one of the great illusions of our time. To understand this deep-seated craving, we must now explore the lesson from materialism. Our exploration of anxiety has shown us how the mind's tendency to live in the future creates immense suffering. This habit is not random. It is often powered by a deep and pervasive belief system, a story whispered to us from the moment we are born into the modern world. That story is the gospel of materialism. It is the promise that happiness, security, and meaning can be purchased. It tells us that if we can just acquire the right car, the right house, the right clothes, or the right title, the gnawing emptiness inside us will finally be filled. We become anxious about the future because we are constantly striving to accumulate the necessary ingredients for this promised happiness. This lesson asks us to examine this promise closely, to see if it is true, and to discover where real wealth can be found. The promise of materialism is seductive. It is broadcast from every screen, every billboard, every magazine. It shows us gleaming objects and smiling people, implicitly promising that the object is the cause of the smile. It creates a powerful equation in our minds. Acquisition equals happiness. And so we begin to run on what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. We fix our desire on a new objector, new phone, for example. We research it, we anticipate it, and for a short time, the anticipation itself is exciting. Then comes the moment of acquisition. We buy the phone. There is a brief thrill, a rush of novelty, a feeling of satisfaction. This is the moment the promise seems to be fulfilled. But then, something insidious happens. The thrill fades, often much faster than we expect. The new phone quickly ceases to be a source of joy and simply becomes our phone. It becomes the new normal, the baseline. The initial happiness evaporates, and the underlying sense of lack returns, often with a new target now in its sights. The mind begins to whisper, "The phone was nice, but what would really make me happy is that new computer, or that vacation, or that promotion." And so, the cycle begins again. We are like a hamster on a wheel, running faster and faster, acquiring more and more, but never actually arriving at a destination of lasting contentment. This is the fundamental lie of materialism. It promises a permanent solution, but delivers only a temporary fix, ensuring that we remain forever thirsty, forever chasing the next fleeting pleasure. The suffering caused by this endless chase goes far beyond mere disappointment. It infects every area of our lives. It creates the anxiety of acquisition, the stress of working long hours, often in jobs we dislike, to earn the money to buy things we don't truly need, to impress people we don't truly know. It also gives birth to the fear of loss. Once we possess something valuable, we are no longer free. We must now worry about protecting it, insuring it, and maintaining it. Our possessions, which promise to serve us, end up possessing us, demanding our constant attention and energy. Perhaps most painfully, materialism thrives on the poison of social comparison. We are taught to measure our worth by what we have in relation to others. We look at a neighbor's new car and feel a pang of envy. We scroll through social media and see curated images of luxurious vacations and beautiful homes, and we feel a sense of our own life's inadequacy. We are constantly looking over our shoulder, measuring, competing. This is a game with no winners, a source of perpetual dissatisfaction, and a breeding ground for resentment and jealousy. And while we pour all our energy into this external chase, our inner world is neglected. The garden of the heart, which requires the cultivation of compassion, wisdom, and inner peace, is left untended and becomes barren. There is a timeless story that reveals the folly of this search for happiness in external things. There was once a great and powerful king who commanded vast armies, lived in a magnificent palace, and possessed more gold and jewels than anyone in the land. Yet, despite having everything a person could possibly want, he was miserable, plagued by a deep sense of emptiness and anxiety. He summoned his wisest advisors and demanded a cure for his unhappiness. They conferred and told him of a legend. If he could find the happiest man in his kingdom and wear his shirt, the man's happiness would be transferred to him. The king immediately sent his emissaries out on this vital mission. They searched far and wide. They interviewed the wealthiest merchants, but found them consumed with worries about their investments. They questioned the most celebrated generals, but found them burdened by the weight of their responsibilities. They sought out revered priests, but found them troubled by doubts. They found many people who were reasonably content, but no one who was truly, radiantly, and unconditionally happy. Finally, one of his guards was passing a humble shack on the outskirts of the city late one night and heard the sound of pure, uninhibited, joyous laughter. Peeking inside, he saw a beggar, a man with no possessions to his name, who was simply beaming with a profound sense of joy. The guards knew they had found their man. They brought the beggar before the king. Overjoyed, the king commanded him, "I am told you are the happiest man in my kingdom. Name your price, and I will give you anything you desire, but you must give me your shirt." The beggar looked down at his own bare chest, and then back at the king. A broad, warm smile spread across his face, and he began to laugh, his joyous laugh. "Your Majesty," he said, "I would give it to you with all my heart, but I do not own a shirt." This is the great lesson. The king, with all his worldly possessions, was searching for happiness as if it were an external object that could be acquired. The beggar, with nothing, possessed the one thing the king truly wanted, because his happiness was entirely internal. It was a state of being, not a state of having. How then do we cultivate this inner wealth? The path offers two powerful antidotes to the poison of materialism: contentment and generosity. Contentment, or apicchata, is the practice of knowing what is enough. In a culture that is built on making us feel that we are not enough and that we do not have enough, contentment is a radical act of rebellion. It is not about self-deprivation or austerity. It is about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we have. It is the practice of gratitude. It is taking the time to appreciate the simple, non-material riches of our lives: a healthy body, the love of family and friends, the beauty of the natural world, the simple gift of this breath. When we truly appreciate what we already have, the desperate thirst for more begins to subside. The second antidote is generosity, or dana. Materialism is the practice of accumulation, of pulling things toward ourselves. Generosity is the practice of letting go, of extending ourselves outwards. The act of giving freely, without any expectation of reward, breaks the spell of clinging. When we give our time, our energy, our resources, or simply our kind attention, we experience a joy that is far deeper and more enduring than the fleeting thrill of acquisition. Generosity affirms our interconnectedness and our fundamental abundance. It shifts our life's central question from "what can I get?" to "what can I give?" The lesson from materialism is not that money or possessions are inherently evil. They are neutral tools. The lesson is that the pursuit of happiness and self-worth through them is a guaranteed path to suffering. True wealth is not measured by the size of our bank account, but by the smallness of our wants. It is an inner peace, a sukha, that is stable and independent of our external circumstances. By cultivating contentment for what is already here and generosity in our hearts, we can step off the exhausting hedonic treadmill and begin to walk the true path of lasting well-being. This endless chase for wealth and status, however, often puts us in direct competition with others. Our happiness becomes entangled with how we perceive ourselves in relation to them, making us especially sensitive to those we see as rivals or critics. This brings us to a most challenging arena of practice: our relationships with those we find difficult. To learn from these often painful interactions, we must now turn to the lesson from difficult people. Having examined the seductive but empty promises of materialism, we now turn our attention from the world of things to the world of people. Our lives are a web of relationships, and while many bring us joy and support, it is an inescapable fact of the human condition that we will encounter people we find difficult. They may be critical, demanding, manipulative, or simply grating to our sensibilities. Our standard reactions are predictable. We feel irritation, we judge, we complain, we strategize, we avoid. We see these people as obstacles to our peace, problems to be managed or endured. This lesson, however, offers a radical and transformative reframing. What if these people are not obstacles on our path? What if they are the path? What if the individuals who challenge us the most are, in fact, our most potent and valuable spiritual teachers? The first step in this reframing is to understand that the people who trigger us most intensely are often acting as mirrors. They have an uncanny ability to find and push our buttons. The immediate impulse is to focus on their annoying behavior, but the deeper practice is to turn our gaze inward and investigate the button itself. Why is this particular behavior so infuriating to me? What belief about myself is being threatened? Is it my need to be seen as competent? My desire to be liked? My attachment to having things my own way? The difficult person becomes a high-powered diagnostic tool, revealing with painful precision the unhealed wounds, the fragile vanities, and the rigid attachments of our own ego. They show us exactly where our practice needs the most work. The person who cuts us off in traffic reveals our lack of patience. The colleague who dismisses our idea reveals our attachment to being right. From this perspective, their difficult behavior, while unpleasant, is a gift. It is a spotlight illuminating the dark corners of our own mind. The second, and perhaps most crucial, insight is to see the suffering behind the behavior. Happy, contented, and peaceful people do not go around making life difficult for others. Arrogance is almost always a mask for deep insecurity. Cruelty is the cry of unhealed pain. A desperate need for control stems from a terrifying inner chaos. When we can look past the abrasive outer shell of a difficult person and sense the frightened, wounded being inside, our entire inner landscape shifts. We stop seeing a monster to be vanquished and start seeing a suffering human being, caught in their own patterns of dukkha, just like us. This does not mean we condone or excuse harmful behavior, but it changes our own inner response from one of anger and judgment to one of compassion or karuna. This compassion is the key that unlocks the prison of reactivity. It breaks the cycle of anger, meeting anger, and introduces the possibility of a wiser, more spacious response. There is a classic story from the life of the Buddha that serves as a masterclass in this practice. One day, as the Buddha was teaching, a man from the crowd, filled with rage and jealousy, came forward and began to insult him. He hurled a torrent of the most vicious and abusive curses he could imagine. The Buddha did not flinch. He did not argue or become defensive. He simply sat in a state of perfect, silent presence, listening with calm and open attention until the man had completely exhausted himself and fell silent. When the man was finished, the Buddha looked at him kindly and asked a simple question. "Son," he said, "if you buy a gift for someone and you offer it to them, but that person does not accept the gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, caught off guard, thought for a moment and replied, "Well, it would belong to me. It's my gift." The Buddha nodded gently. "Exactly so," he said. "Today, you have come and offered me a gift of anger, insults, and abuse. I do not accept your gift." He then turned and continued his teaching, leaving the man to stand there, still holding his own toxic offering. This is a profound lesson in emotional sovereignty. The Buddha demonstrates that another person's negativity cannot harm us unless we agree to receive it. We are not obligated to accept the angry, judgmental gifts that others try to hand us. We can politely and internally refuse delivery. Their anger is their anger. Their suffering is their suffering. By not reacting, by not taking it personally, we protect our own inner peace and, in a way, offer a powerful teaching back to them. We show them that their poison only has power over themselves. This does not mean, however, that we become passive doormats. To refuse the gift of another's anger does not mean we must allow them to cause harm. True compassion, the path teaches, must always include compassion for oneself. Sometimes, the most compassionate and skillful action we can take is to set a firm, clear, and unwavering boundary. The crucial difference lies in the energy from which the boundary is set. A boundary set from anger, hatred, or fear is an act of war. It is just another form of conflict. But a boundary set from a place of self-respect, clarity, and compassion for both parties is an act of wisdom. It might sound like, "I care about our relationship, but I will not engage in conversations that are based on blame and accusation," or "I am willing to hear your concerns when you are ready to speak to me calmly, but I will not be shouted at." The boundary is clear and protective, but it is not an attack. It preserves our own well-being, while leaving the door open for a healthier interaction in the future. It can be helpful to think of difficult people as a raspy stone or a piece of spiritual sandpaper. A raw gemstone does not become brilliant and multifaceted on its own. It must be ground, tumbled, and polished, often by a rough, abrasive material. Difficult people are this abrasive material for our character. They polish our patience until it shines. They grind away the sharp and brittle edges of our ego. They challenge our compassion to expand beyond the easy love we feel for those who are kind to us. Without these challenging interactions, we would remain dull and unrefined. When we can truly see them in this light, we can even begin to feel a sense of gratitude for the unlikely role they play in our liberation. Difficult people are not, therefore, random punishments sent to torment us. They are assignments. They are our greatest teachers in disguise. They are mirrors that show us where we are stuck. They are opportunities to practice seeing the suffering that underlies all harmful behavior. By learning to politely refuse the gift of their negativity, and by setting compassionate boundaries from a place of wisdom, we can transform these relationships from sources of chronic frustration into crucibles for our own spiritual development. They are the grit that creates the pearl, the sandpaper that polishes the jewel of our heart. These interactions often leave us with the sting of emotional pain. But pain is not limited to our relationships. Our own bodies can become a source of intense and chronic discomfort. How do we apply these same principles to the raw, visceral reality of our own physical sensations? To explore this intimate challenge, we must now turn to the lesson from physical pain. Our journey has now led us through the complex and often painful dynamics of our relationships with others. We have learned to see difficult people as our teachers and their anger as a reflection of their own suffering. This practice requires us to absorb the first arrows of life without firing the second arrows of reactivity. But what happens when the first arrow comes not from another person, but from within our own skin? What happens when the body itself becomes a source of pain? This is the lesson from physical pain, one of the most immediate, demanding, and intimate challenges we can face. It is here, in the crucible of our own flesh and bone, that the distinction between pain and suffering becomes most vital. Physical pain is all-consuming. Unlike a difficult memory or a worry about the future, which the mind can sometimes escape, pain is relentlessly present. It screams for our attention. It can feel like an invading enemy, an unjust punishment, a flaw in our very being. The core teaching of this path, however, makes a radical proposition. While pain might be a fact, suffering is a choice. Suffering is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. The lesson is not about learning to eliminate pain, which is often impossible, but about learning to dismantle the scaffold of suffering that we build around it. Let us revisit the parable of the two arrows. The first arrow is the clean, raw physical sensation itself. It is the nerve signals firing, the physiological reality of an injury, an illness, or a chronic condition. This is the pain. It is what it is. The second arrow is our mental and emotional reaction to that pain. It is the thought, this is unbearable. It is the fear, what if this never goes away? It is the resistance, the physical tensing and bracing against the sensation. It is the story we weave into our identity. I am a person with chronic pain, my bad back, my terrible migraines. This second arrow, the fear, the resistance, the story is not pain, it is suffering. And it is this suffering, this mental proliferation, that often causes us more anguish than the raw physical sensation itself. The practice, then, is a courageous act of turning towards the pain with mindfulness, rather than reflexively running from it. It is a process of deconstructing our experience. The first step is to soften. Our instinct when we feel pain is to tighten, to clench, to create an armor of resistance around the affected area. The practice is to consciously do the opposite, to breathe into the area and with each exhalation to invite a sense of softening and allowing. We give the sensation permission to be there, just for this moment. This act alone begins to reduce the suffering of resistance. We stop fighting a war against our own body. The second step is to investigate the pain with the detached curiosity of a scientist. We usually experience pain as a single, monstrous, solid label, pain. But what is it, actually? Move your attention right into the center of the sensation. Instead of judging it, get curious about its qualities. Is it hot or is it cold? Is it sharp or is it dull? Is it a throbbing sensation, a burning one, or a tingling one? Does it have a clear, hard edge, or are its borders fuzzy and indistinct? Is it a solid, continuous block of sensation, or is it composed of millions of tiny, vibrating points of energy? As you observe it this closely, without judgment, a remarkable thing happens. The solid monolith of pain begins to break apart into a dynamic, shifting field of pure sensation. This leads to the third step, seeing its impermanence, its anicca. By watching the sensation so intimately, you discover that it is not static, it is a process. It changes, moment by moment. It intensifies, it subsides, it shifts, it moves. It is not a permanent thing, but a fleeting, ever-changing event in the field of your awareness. The fear that this will last forever cannot survive this direct observation. You see, in your own experience, that even pain is impermanent. The fourth step is the deepest, the depersonalization of the pain, the experience of anatta. As you observe these raw sensation sheet, pressure, vibration, you can begin to ask, who is feeling this? Is there a solid, central me that owns this pain? Or is there simply the sensation itself, arising and passing away in a field of awareness? You begin to realize that you are not the pain. You are the spacious, silent awareness that is able to know the pain. This shift in identity, from I am in pain to awareness, is noting a sensation of pain, creates a profound sense of inner freedom, even while the physical sensation may continue. There is a Zen story that captures this shift in perspective perfectly. An old and revered master was nearing the end of his life and was experiencing great physical suffering from his illness. His devoted students gathered around his bedside, their faces etched with worry and sorrow for their beloved teacher. They saw his pain as a tragedy, a terrible affliction. The master, sensing their distress, opened his eyes and managed a weak smile. He gestured toward his own frail, pained body and said something they never forgot. "Do not be so troubled. A distinguished guest has come to visit me." This is a teaching of incredible depth. The students, like most of us, identified the master with his pain. They saw them as one and the same, but the master himself did not. He had completely depersonalized the experience. The pain was not him. It was a temporary phenomenon, a guest that was visiting the home of his body. He was not its victim, he was its host. He did not fight it or resent its presence. He treated it with a kind of respectful, detached curiosity. This is the freedom that is possible when we stop identifying with our sensations and rest in the vast, open space of awareness itself. Finally, this practice asks us to cultivate compassion for the body that is in pain. We so often treat our bodies like machines, and when they break down or hurt, we get angry and frustrated with them. We see the bad knee or the aching back as an enemy. But the body is not a machine. It is a living, breathing organism that is doing its absolute best to maintain balance and health. The practice is to send kindness to the parts of ourselves that are hurting, to place a hand on the area, and to consciously send it feelings of warmth, gratitude, and care. To change the inner monologue from "I hate this pain" to "May this part of my body be at ease. I am here with you. Thank you for carrying me." This act of loving kindness radically changes our relationship with our body from one of antagonism to one of tender partnership. Physical pain is one of life's most formidable teachers. It brings us face to face with our own vulnerability and impermanence. The lesson it offers is not one of grim endurance, but one of profound differentiation, the ability to separate the clean, unavoidable sensation of pain from the dirty, optional suffering of our mental and emotional reaction to it. Through mindfulness, We can learn to approach our pain with a curious and compassionate detachment, softening our resistance and freeing ourselves from the fearful stories we weave around it. We can learn to be the calm host to our body's distinguished guests, rather than a prisoner in their presence. This intimate, internal struggle with pain requires immense patience. But often, our ability to be present is sabotaged not by an inner sensation, but by a relentless external pressure that defines modern life, the feeling of being constantly, overwhelmingly busy. This chronic sense of pressure is its own form of suffering. To address it, we must now turn to the lesson from busyness. Having explored the intensely personal and internal landscape of physical pain, we now zoom back out to confront a collective affliction of the modern world, a form of suffering so common that we have come to see it as a virtue. This is the lesson from busyness. We live in a culture that worships at the altar of productivity. We wear our exhaustion as a badge of honor, our packed schedules as a sign of our importance. When asked how we are, the most common and often proudest response is, busy, so busy. We have become addicted to activity, to motion, to the feeling of being occupied, often because we are terrified of what we might find in the silence that lies beneath. Busyness has become the most socially acceptable form of escapism. This lesson invites us to look deeply at this addiction and to distinguish between fruitful, chosen activity and the frantic, compulsive busyness that drains our life of all peace and meaning. The first step is to recognize the cult of busyness for what it is. We have been conditioned to believe that a full calendar equals a full life. We mistake movement for progress and activity for accomplishment. This belief drives us to fill every empty space in our day with more tasks, more information, more stimulation. But why are we running so hard? What are we running from? For many of us, busyness is a shield. It is a way to avoid the discomfort of being alone with ourselves. In the quiet moments, difficult feelings can surface: loneliness, a sense of purposelessness, a flicker of existential dread. A frantic schedule is a brilliant defense mechanism against these uncomfortable truths. If we are always doing, we never have to simply be. If we are always connected to the external world, we never have to face our own inner landscape. Busyness is a masterful strategy for avoiding the fundamental questions of a human life. One of the chief culprits in this culture of frantic activity is the myth of multitasking. We have been sold the idea that the ability to do several things at once is a superpower, a key to efficiency. But neuroscience reveals a different story. The human brain cannot, in fact, focus on multiple complex tasks simultaneously. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching. The mind is just jumping back and forth, incredibly quickly, from one thing to another. This constant switching comes at a tremendous cost. It floods our system with stress hormones. It dramatically increases the likelihood of making mistakes. It stifles creativity, which thrives in states of deep focus, and it leaves us feeling frazzled, fragmented, and perpetually unfinished. We end our days having touched upon a dozen things, but having given our full, deep presence to none of them. We do more, but we accomplish less, and we sacrifice our peace in the process. The antidote to this self-imposed chaos is twofold: the practice of single tasking and the creation of sacred pauses. Single tasking, or monotasking, is a mindful rebellion against the myth of multitasking. It is the simple, radical act of doing one thing at a time. When you are writing an email, just write the email. Close the other tabs. Put your phone away. Give your full attention to the task. When you are eating your lunch, just eat your lunch. Taste the food. Experience the textures. Don't scroll through the news while you chew. When you are listening to a friend, just listen. Give them the sacred gift of your undivided presence. This practice not only makes our work more effective, and less prone to error, it has a profound effect on our nervous system. It reunites our scattered attention, calms our fragmented mind, and brings a sense of wholeness and peace to our actions. The second part of the antidote is the intentional creation of sacred pauses throughout the day. We often believe that peace can only be found on a week-long meditation retreat or a vacation to a remote island. But peace is available in the small gaps, if we choose to notice them. The practice is to sprinkle your day with pockets of stillness. It can be as simple as taking 3 conscious, deliberate breaths before you answer a ringing phone. It can be the choice to look out the window and watch a cloud drift by for 60 seconds between meetings. It can be sitting in your parked car for just a moment of silence before walking into your home at the end of the day. These are not wastes of time. These pauses are the moments we sharpen our saw. There is a well-known parable that speaks directly to this. A traveler walking through a forest came upon a woodcutter who was working furiously to saw down a massive tree. The woodcutter was drenched in sweat, panting for breath, and appeared utterly exhausted. The traveler watched for a while and noticed that despite the man's frantic effort, he was making very little progress. The saw blade seemed to be scraping and screeching against the wood, barely making a mark. The traveler approached him and said, "Excuse me, friend, but I couldn't help but notice how hard you are working. Your saw looks very dull. Why don't you take a break to sharpen it?" The woodcutter, without pausing his frantic sawing for even a second, replied with exasperation, "Sharpen my saw? I can't stop to sharpen my saw. I'm too busy sawing." We are all this woodcutter. We are so caught up in the doing, so addicted to the motion, so convinced of our own busyness, that we refuse to take the time to sharpen our saw. Our saw is our mind, our focus, our inner state of being. The practices of meditation, rest, and simple, unstructured stillness are not luxuries. They are the essential maintenance that makes our work effective, our decisions wise, and our lives joyful. The pause is not a detour from the work. It is an essential part of the work. Finally, mastering our busyness requires us to learn to wield one of the most powerful and compassionate words in any language, the word no. Much of our frantic activity comes from an inability to set healthy boundaries. We say yes to requests and demands not because they align with our deepest priorities, but out of a sense of guilt, a desire to please others, or a fear of missing out. A wise and compassionate no to an external demand is often a profound and necessary yes to our own well-being, our sanity, and the things that truly matter to us. Each yes we utter has a cost in our finite supply of time and energy. The practice is to choose our commitments with conscious intention, rather than allowing our lives to become a chaotic reaction to the demands of others. The lesson from busyness, therefore, is an invitation to wake up from our cultural trance of productivity. It is a call to learn the crucial difference between being effective and being merely frantic. By embracing the quiet power of doing one thing at a time, by peppering our days with sacred pauses to sharpen our saw, and by learning to say a wise and intentional no, we can begin to find a deep and abiding peace, not by stopping our lives, but by fundamentally changing how we inhabit our activities. We discover that our greatest effectiveness, our deepest creativity, and our most profound joy do not spring from a frantic mind, but from a place of deep and resilient stillness. This journey through the challenges of modern life has given us a set of tools and perspectives. Now, it is time to deepen our practice by cultivating a fundamental attitude, a state of mind that allows us to approach every single moment, whether difficult or delightful, as a fresh opportunity to learn. To do this, we must explore one of the most cherished concepts in the Zen tradition. We must now turn to the lesson of Shoshin, the beginner's mind. Having navigated the challenges of modern life from failure and grief to busyness and anxiety, we have gathered a set of powerful tools and perspectives. We have learned to be mindful, to accept what is, and to find the lesson hidden within our struggles. Now, our journey takes a subtle but profound turn. We shift from focusing on specific problems to cultivating a fundamental attitude, a state of being that can transform our entire relationship with experience. This is the lesson of Shoshin, a Japanese Zen term that translates as beginner's mind. It is perhaps the single most important attitude to cultivate on the spiritual path, for it is the key that keeps the door of learning and wonder perpetually open. The great Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki famously said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's there are few." This simple statement holds a universe of wisdom. Let us first examine the expert's mind. This is the mind that most of us inhabit most of the time. It is the mind that thinks it already knows. It is filled to the brim with our past experiences, our education, our opinions, our judgments, and our labels. When the expert's mind encounters a person or a situation, it doesn't experience it directly. Instead, it instantly runs the new data through its thick filter of pre-existing knowledge and drops it into a familiar category. Oh, that's just my boss being demanding again. This is another boring meeting. I've been married for 20 years. I know everything there is to know about my spouse. The expert's mind is closed. It is not open to surprise. It cannot learn anything new because its fundamental assumption is that it has nothing left to learn. It mistakes its own concepts about reality for reality itself. The beginner's mind is the complete opposite. Think of a small child seeing the ocean for the first time. There is no concept of ocean. There is only the vast, roaring, unpredictable, and astonishing reality itself. There is awe, there is wonder, there is a total absorption in the direct experience of the moment. The beginner's mind is empty, but this is not a vacant emptiness. It is a state of spacious readiness. It is an open, humble, and eager mind, free from the arrogance of preconceived notions. Where the expert's mind declares, "I know what this is," the beginner's mind asks, "What is this?" This simple shift from a declaration to a question is the opening of 1,000 doors. The expert's mind creates what we might call the tyranny of familiarity. It deadens our world. As we become more familiar with the people and routines in our lives, we stop truly seeing them. Our perception becomes lazy. We no longer see our partner. We see the mental caricature of our partner that we have built up over years of shared history. We no longer truly listen to our children. We hear their words through the thick filter of our expectations and judgments. We no longer taste our morning coffee. We just perform the mechanical ritual of drinking it. We are living with ghosts and concepts, interacting not with the vibrant, ever-changing reality of the present moment, but with the stale memories of the past. Beginner's mind is the antidote to this tyranny. It is the practice of learning to see the familiar as if for the first time, every time. There is a classic Zen story that serves as the perfect parable for this teaching. A very famous and learned university professor, a man who had authored many books on philosophy and religion, came to visit a quiet old Zen master to inquire about Zen. The professor, eager to display his own erudition, began to speak at length, dominating the conversation with his complex theories, his interpretations of ancient texts, and his sophisticated understanding of spirituality. The old Zen master listened patiently and politely, nodding from time to time. After a while, the master said, "Let us have some tea." He brought out a beautiful porcelain teacup and a pot of hot tea. He placed the cup in front of the professor and began to pour. He filled the cup to the very brim, but then he did not stop. He kept pouring. The hot tea overflowed the cup, spilled into the saucer, and began to run all over the table. The professor watched this with growing alarm. Finally, he could not contain himself any longer and shouted, "Stop! The cup is over full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring, looked the professor directly in the eye, and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" We are all that, Professor. Our minds are that full cup, overflowing with our certainties, our beliefs, our identities, and the pride of our expertise. We come to life with no room for anything new to enter. To truly learn, to truly grow, we must have the humility and the courage to empty our cup. We must be willing to set aside what we think we know and approach the moment with the fresh, open curiosity of a true beginner. How do we cultivate this state in our daily lives? It begins with a simple, internal shift in posture. When you enter a familiar situation, such as a team meeting at work, you can consciously adopt the don't know mind. Intentionally let go of your predictions about how people will behave or what will be said. Tell yourself, "I don't know what will happen here," and simply be open to observing what actually unfolds. When you speak with a loved one, try to listen without the filter of their past. Ask yourself, who is this person right now, in this moment? You may be surprised by what you see and hear when you are not blinded by your own assumptions. Another powerful technique is to drop from the conceptual mind into the sensory mind. The expert's mind lives in the world of labels and ideas. The beginner's mind lives in the world of direct, raw sensation. When you feel yourself trapped in old patterns of thought, bring your attention fully to your senses. What are the specific colors and shapes you see right now, without naming them? What are the sounds you can hear, received as pure vibration? What is the feeling of the air on your skin? This act of grounding in the senses pulls you out of the stale world of concepts and into the fresh, living reality of the present. Ultimately, beginner's mind is the essential attitude for seeing that everything truly is a lesson. If we approach life as an expert, we will only ever encounter confirmation of what we already believe. But if we approach life as a humble beginner, then everyone we meet is a potential teacher. Every challenge is a new and unknown curriculum. Every moment, no matter how mundane, is a text waiting to be read for the first time. The difficult person is no longer just a difficult person. They are a fascinating, unpredictable phenomenon to be observed with curiosity. The routine chore is no longer just boring. It is an unexplored territory of sensation and presence. Shoshin is not a celebration of ignorance. It is the cultivation of a higher wisdom, the wisdom that knows that the universe is infinitely more vast, complex, and mysterious than our small concepts can ever contain. It is the humility to empty our cup again and again, so that we may be continually filled with the fresh, vibrant, and ever-changing truth of life as it is. This practice of setting aside our concepts to see things freshly prepares us for one of the most profound and subtle teachings of all. When we truly empty our cup and look at the nature of reality without our preconceived labels, what do we find? Zen and Mahayana Buddhism suggest that we find a reality characterized by a vast, dynamic, and interconnected emptiness. To explore this deep truth, we must now venture into the lesson of shunyata. Having cultivated the beginner's mind, we have learned to empty our cup of preconceived notions, allowing us to see the world with fresh, unbiased eyes. Now, with this clarity, we are prepared to look upon the very nature of reality itself, to ask the deepest question: what is the fundamental nature of a thing, of a person, of the self? The answer offered by the wisdom traditions, particularly in the Mahayana and Zen schools, is perhaps the most challenging and liberating insight of all. It is the lesson of shunyata, a Sanskrit word most often translated as emptiness. Before we proceed, it is crucial to empty our cup of any ideas we might have about this word. To Western ears, emptiness sounds like a terrifying void, a bleak nothingness, a nihilistic denial of existence. This is a complete misunderstanding. In this context, emptiness does not mean non-existence. In fact, it is the very condition that makes existence, change, and life itself possible. It is not a void to be feared, but a truth to be realized, a truth that unlocks the door to boundless compassion and freedom from suffering. To understand this profound concept, let us not begin with abstract philosophy, but with a simple, concrete object. Let us look deeply at a single sheet of paper. We hold it in our hand, and our mind immediately labels it paper. It seems to be a solid, separate, independent thing. But the practice of deep looking, born from a beginner's mind, asks us to look again. What is this sheet of paper really made of? For this paper to exist, there must first be a tree. For the tree to exist, there must be a forest, soil, and the rain that nourished it. So, the forest and the rain are inside this sheet of paper. If we look at the rain, we see that it comes from the clouds. So, the clouds are in the paper. For the tree to grow, it needed sunlight for photosynthesis. So, the sun is here in this sheet of paper. The tree was cut down by a logger. The logger needed to eat breakfast to have the energy to do his work. So, the wheat that grew in a field and the farmer who grew it are also present in this paper. The logger's parents, who gave birth to him, are in the paper. And what of the factory that turned the wood pulp into this sheet? The people who designed the machines, the electricity that powered the factory, the minerals that were mined to make the machinery, all of these elements are here. If you were to continue this investigation, you would see that the entire universe, in one way or another, has participated in the creation of this single sheet of paper. Now, let us ask the crucial question. If you were to return all of these non-paper elements back to their sources, if you gave the sunlight back to the sun, the cloud back to the sky, the water back to the river, the logger back to his parents, the mindfulness of the factory worker back to their mind, what would be left? Nothing. There would be no sheet of paper. This is the meaning of emptiness. The sheet of paper is empty of a separate, independent, isolated self. Its entire being is composed of things that we call not paper. Its existence is entirely dependent on and interwoven with everything else. Its emptiness of a private self is the very condition for its being. Now, let us courageously turn this same deep looking upon ourselves. We have already deconstructed the self into the 5 aggregates of form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, and found no solid core. Shunyata is the deeper ground of this insight. Am I a separate, independent entity? Let us look at this physical body. It is made of the food I have eaten, the water I have drunk, the air I am breathing in this very moment. If you take away these non-me elements, the body vanishes. My body is empty of a separate self. It is a manifestation of the cosmos. And what of my mind, my thoughts, my ideas, my values? Are they mine? They are shaped by the language I learned from my parents and teachers, the culture I was raised in, the books I have read, the conversations I have had, the joys and sorrows I have experienced. My ancestors, my friends, the philosophers, the artists, the saints, all of their thoughts and experiences are woven into the fabric of what I call my mind. If you were to remove all of these influences, what would be left of me? Like the sheet of paper, I am utterly empty of a separate, isolated self. My entire being is a temporary confluence of countless causes and conditions, a brief and beautiful knot in the infinite net of the universe. This understanding protects us from the terror of nihilism. Emptiness is not nothingness. It is, in fact, the ultimate ground of all potentiality, a universe where things possessed a fixed, separate, unchanging self would be a dead and frozen universe. A seed could never become a tree because it would be stuck in its fixed seedness. A caterpillar could never become a butterfly. Water could never become a cloud. It is precisely because all things are empty of a fixed, independent nature that they are free to change, to grow, to interact, to influence one another, and to transform. Emptiness is not a static void. It is the dynamic, creative, and boundless dance of existence itself. When this insight moves from an intellectual concept to a felt reality, it transforms our lives in two profound ways. First, it is the ultimate antidote to clinging and craving, the tanha that causes our suffering. If everything is empty of a solid, graspable self, what is there to cling to? Trying to possess a person, a status, or a thing is revealed to be as foolish as trying to grab a fistful of smoke. The motivation for our desperate grasping simply dissolves in the light of this understanding. We learn to hold the world with an open hand, appreciating things as they arise and letting them go gracefully as they pass. Second, and most beautifully, the realization of emptiness gives birth to boundless compassion. The hard, sharp line we draw between me and you is revealed to be an illusion. When we see our own nature as a confluence of the entire universe, we see that the same is true for everyone and everything else. Your joy is made of non-you elements. Your suffering is made of non-you elements. Your body and my body are made of the same sun and the same earth. Your desire for happiness is the same as my desire for happiness. When this is seen clearly, harming you becomes an absurd impossibility, because you are not truly separate from me. Helping you is the most natural thing in the world, because your well-being contributes to the well-being of the whole, of which I am a part. This is not a sentimental platitude or a moral instruction. It is a direct perception of reality. Emptiness, therefore, is not a bleak and terrifying negation of life. It is a joyful and radical affirmation of its total, seamless, and miraculous interconnectedness. It is the realization that we are not separate nouns, but interconnected verbs. We are not fragments, but unique and intricate patterns in a single, magnificent cosmic tapestry. To see this truth is to be liberated from the cramped prison of the separate self, and to open the heart to a love that knows no boundaries, a compassion that extends to all beings without exception. This profound vision of emptiness, that everything is made of everything else, points us directly to the most positive and relational truth of our existence. To name this truth and explore its implications for how we live, we must now turn to the lesson of interbeing, or interdependence. The profound lesson of emptiness, or shunyata, has dismantled our illusion of a separate, independent self. It has shown us that nothing exists in isolation, that all things are empty of a private identity. This insight, which can initially feel like a negation, is in fact the gateway to the most positive, awe-inspiring, and relational truth of our existence. If emptiness tells us what we are not separate selves, then this next lesson tells us what we are. This is the lesson of interdependence, a concept beautifully captured by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh with the word interbeing. It is the joyful realization that to be is always and only to interbe. Let us return once more to our simple sheet of paper. We saw that it is empty of a separate self because it is made entirely of non-paper elements: the sun, the cloud, the forest, the logger. The teaching of interbeing takes this one step further. It does not just say that the cloud is in the paper, it says that the cloud and the paper are. The existence of one is contingent upon the existence of the other. The paper cannot be without the cloud being. The sun cannot be without the paper being, because without the paper, the sun's light would not be captured and expressed in this particular form. This is a radical shift from seeing a world of separate nouns that interact, to seeing a single, dynamic verb of existence, a universe where everything is constantly co-creating everything else. We ourselves are a perfect expression of interbeing. We inter-are with the air, exchanging carbon dioxide for oxygen, with the trees in a ceaseless, intimate dance. We inter-are with the earth, taking in food and water that becomes the very cells of our body. We inter-are with our ancestors, carrying their genetic and cultural legacy within us. We inter-are with our society, our thoughts shaped by a language and culture we did not create. To believe we are a separate self is as mistaken as a single wave believing it is separate from the ocean. The wave is a temporary, beautiful manifestation of the ocean, and its entire existence is to interbe with the water, the wind, and the seafloor. In the rich tapestry of Buddhist imagery, there is a metaphor that captures this reality with breathtaking beauty. It is the image of Indra's net. Imagine a vast cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, brilliant, multifaceted jewel. Each jewel is perfectly clear and polished, and its surface reflects every other jewel in the vast, infinite net. If you look closely at any one jewel, you will see the shimmering reflections of all the others. But the image goes deeper still. If you look at the reflection of any jewel within that first jewel, you will see that it too contains the reflections of all the other jewels in the net, and so on, into an infinite, recursive, and dazzling display of mutual co-creation. The entire universe is reflected in each part, and each part is reflected in the whole. This is the vision of interbeing. Each of us is a jewel in this net. Our existence is utterly dependent on and defined by our relationship with every other jewel. We are unique, yet inseparable. When a single jewel is polished and shines a little more brightly, its light is shared and reflected across the entire net. When a single jewel is tarnished by greed or hatred, its dimness is cast upon all the others. When this vision moves from a beautiful idea to a deeply felt reality, it revolutionizes the way we live. It completely undermines the logic of selfishness. If we are all inextricably connected, then to harm another being, to exploit the environment, or to act out of pure self-interest is a profound misunderstanding of who we are. It is like the left hand attempting to hoard riches from the right hand. It is the lung declaring war on the heart. Any harm done anywhere in the net is ultimately harm done to oneself, for the net is a single, unified whole. From this understanding, compassion ceases to be a moral chore or a virtuous ideal to be strived for. It becomes the most sane, logical, and natural expression of our being. When we see that your suffering and my suffering are not truly separate, that they are composed of the same shared elements of the human condition, then the desire to alleviate your suffering arises spontaneously. It is not an act of noble sacrifice, it is an act of wisdom. To help you is to help the whole of which I am a part. My well-being is not, and cannot be, separate from yours. Similarly, a profound and humble gratitude begins to bloom in the heart. We awaken to the fact that we are the recipients of infinite generosity. Our lives are supported by countless visible and invisible conditions. The sun, which asks for nothing in return. The farmers who grew our food. The sanitation workers who keep our cities clean. The countless generations of ancestors who survived so that we could be here. When we see our lives as a product of this vast web of interbeing, a sense of entitlement gives way to a quiet, joyful thankfulness for the privilege of our existence. This vision also imbues our every action with a new sense of meaning and responsibility. In an interconnected universe, there are no small, isolated acts. Every thought we think, every word we speak, every action we take sends ripples out through the entire net. A small, uncelebrated act of kindness contributes to the light and harmony of the whole. A thought of anger or a word of gossip contributes to the world's suffering. This doesn't need to be a heavy burden. Instead, it can be an empowering realization that our lives matter, that our choices have significance, and that we are active co-creators of the world we inhabit, moment by moment. The way we drink our coffee, the way we speak to the person at the checkout counter, the way we consume resources, all of it is part of the great dance of interbeing, the lesson of interdependence. is the joyful and positive expression of the lesson of emptiness. It is the liberating shift from seeing ourselves as isolated, competing fragments to experiencing ourselves as integral and precious threads in the magnificent, shimmering tapestry of life. We realize that we are not a lonely spectator looking at the universe. We are the universe experiencing and expressing itself in this unique form. This profound understanding of our interconnectedness, of the elegant balance of the whole, gives us a vision of the ideal. But how do we walk this path in a practical way, day by day? How do we navigate the complexities of life, with its competing demands and desires, without falling into destructive extremes? To find a skillful and balanced way to live, we must now explore one of the most fundamental principles of the Buddha's teaching, the lesson of the middle way. Our journey has led us to a profound vision of reality as a seamless, shimmering web of interbeing, a reality where nothing exists in isolation. This understanding of the universe's intricate balance and harmony is not just a beautiful philosophy, it is a direct call to action. It begs the question, how do we, as individual jewels in this cosmic net, live in a way that honors this deep connection? How do we navigate the complexities of our lives, desires, our ambitions, our relationships skillfully and peacefully? The answer lies in one of the most foundational and practical teachings of the Buddha, the lesson of the middle way. When we hear the phrase middle way, our modern minds might jump to the idea of a bland compromise, a 50-50 split, a lukewarm mediocrity that lacks passion or conviction. But this is not at all what it means. The middle way, or Majjhima Patipada, is not a lazy average. It is a noble and dynamic path, a razor's edge of wisdom that actively steers clear of the two great traps of extremism. The Buddha discovered that both extremes, while seemingly opposite, ultimately lead to the same destination: suffering. The middle way is the skillful art of finding the balance, harmony, and freedom that exist between these two painful poles. The Buddha's own life story is the perfect illustration of this discovery. He began his life as Prince Siddhartha, living in the extreme of sensual indulgence. He was surrounded by every imaginable luxury, shielded from all sights of sickness, old age, and death. He had palaces for every season, the finest foods, the most beautiful music, and endless entertainment. Yet, in the midst of this perfect pleasure, he felt a profound spiritual unease, a sense of hollowness. He realized that a life dedicated to chasing fleeting pleasures was a gilded cage, a distraction that could never lead to lasting peace or an end to suffering. And so, he abandoned this extreme and swung to its complete opposite. He left the palace and became a wandering ascetic, dedicating himself to the extreme of self-mortification. He joined groups of yogis who believed that true liberation could be found by torturing the body and crushing its desires. He practiced extreme fasting until his ribs showed through his skin. He held his breath until he felt excruciating pain in his head. He slept on beds of thorns. He pushed his body and mind to the absolute limits of endurance. Yet, after 6 years of this grueling practice, he was no closer to true understanding. He had mastered self-denial, but he had only succeeded in weakening his body and clouding his mind with exhaustion. This path, too, only led to suffering. It was only when he rejected both of these extremes that the true path revealed itself. Sitting near death by a river, he accepted a simple bowl of rice milk from a young village woman. This act was a profound turning point. He abandoned the path of self-torture and nourished his body, recognizing it not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a necessary vehicle for a clear mind. With this newfound strength and clarity, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not in a state of indulgence or denial, but in a state of perfect, balanced presence. And it was there that he finally awakened. His entire life was a testament to the fact that the path to liberation is found not in extremism, but in a wise and noble middle. A beautiful story from the Buddha's teaching life makes this principle even more practical. There was a monk named Sona who had been a gifted musician, a master of the lute, before joining the monastic order. Sona was incredibly diligent, practicing walking meditation with such ferocious effort that the soles of his feet cracked and bled. Yet, despite his heroic striving, he felt discouraged and frustrated, making little progress and contemplating giving up. The Buddha, knowing his state of mind, went to him and asked about his former craft. "Sona," he said, "as a skilled musician, tell me, what happens if the string of your lute is tuned too tight?" Sona replied, "Venerable sir, it will snap." The Buddha then asked, "And what happens if the string is tuned too loose?" Sona answered, "Sir, it will not make a sound." The Buddha then delivered the heart of the teaching. The path of spiritual practice, Sona, is just like tuning your lute. If your effort is too tight, too strained and aggressive, it leads to restlessness, anxiety, and burnout. If your effort is too loose, too slack and lazy, it leads to complacency and dullness. To produce a beautiful sound, the string must be tuned just right, with a perfect balance of sustained effort and relaxed ease. This is the essence of the middle way. It is not about how much effort we make, but about the wisdom and quality of our effort. It is the art of tuning the instrument of our own body and mind. We can apply this art of tuning to every aspect of our modern lives. In our work, we can steer clear of the extreme of hustle culture, which leads to burnout and a life devoid of joy, and the extreme of apathy, which leads to stagnation. The middle way is a rhythm of focused, productive work, followed by genuine, restorative, rest the sharpening of the saw. In our self-discipline, we can avoid the extreme of harsh, self-critical perfectionism, which is just a form of violence against ourselves, and the extreme of thoughtless indulgence, which keeps us stuck in our unskillful habits. The middle way is having the discipline to wake up early to meditate, but also having the self-compassion to be kind to ourselves when we are sick or exhausted. It is a balance of effort and acceptance, of striving and surrender. This principle also applies to our views about reality. The path skillfully navigates between the philosophical extreme of eternalism, the belief in a solid, separate, unchanging soul that lives forever, and the extreme of nihilism, the belief that nothing matters because we are annihilated at death. Our exploration of anatta and shunyata showed us the problem with eternalism, and our vision of interbeing and causality shows us that our actions have consequences that ripple out indefinitely, refuting nihilism. The middle way sees life as a meaningful, dynamic, and continuous process of change, without clinging to a fantasy of permanence or falling into a pit of meaninglessness. The middle way is the ultimate lesson in practical wisdom. It is not a fixed doctrine, but a dynamic and responsive path that we must find for ourselves in each moment. It is the art of tuning our lives, letting go of the violent pull of the extremes, and discovering the profound power, beauty, and peace that reside in the calm and luminous center. It is the practical embodiment of all the wisdom we have explored, a way to walk through the world with grace, balance, and harmony. This path of constant tuning and retuning is not a linear journey with a final destination. It is a cyclical process, a practice we engage in every day. All the lessons we have learned are not separate steps on a ladder, but interwoven threads in a single, continuous whole. To see how these threads come together, we must now explore our final lesson, the lesson of the circle, the lesson of the Enso. Having journeyed through the great lessons of existence and arrived at the balanced wisdom of the middle way, we might be tempted to think we have reached the end of a linear path. We have followed a sequence of lessons, from suffering to enlightenment, as if climbing a ladder. But the final and perhaps most holistic lesson of this path is to let go of the ladder itself. The spiritual journey is not a straight line from a low point to a high point. It is a circle. It is a continuous process of learning, realizing, integrating, and beginning again. The perfect symbol for this is found in the Zen tradition, the enso, a circle hand drawn in a single, fluid, and uninhibited brushstroke. The enso is one of the most profound expressions in Zen art. It is drawn in one breath, in one continuous motion, in a moment of pure presence, where the mind is free from thought and the body moves with innate grace. It is at once the simplest of forms and the most complex of symbols. It represents the totality of the cosmos, the wholeness of our experience, the shimmering, interconnected web of interbeing. It is a circle, yet it is so much more. The empty space within the circle is just as important as the brushed ink itself. It represents the great emptiness, the shunyata, the boundless potential from which all forms arise, and to which they all return. The form of the circle is born from this emptiness, and contains this emptiness. They are. Often, the circle is intentionally left with a small opening. This is a crucial detail. The opening signifies that the enso is not a closed, static, and perfect state. It is open to the world, open to growth, open to the messy and unpredictable reality of life. It represents the beauty found in imperfection, the Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi. It tells us that enlightenment is not a state of being sealed off from the world in some sterile perfection, but a state of being fully, compassionately, and openly engaged with life as it is, with all its cracks and openings. The single, uncorrectable brushstroke also represents the uniqueness of each moment. It cannot be fixed or retraced. It is a pure expression of this one, unrepeatable instant. It is a lesson in wholehearted presence. To understand how the spiritual journey itself is a circle, we can turn to one of the most beautiful teaching tools in all of Zen, the 10 bulls, or the 10 ox, herding pictures. This series of 10 images, accompanied by short poems, depicts the entire arc of the spiritual path. From confusion to full realization, the journey begins with the search for the bull. This is us at the beginning, lost, confused, feeling the sting of dukkha and knowing something is missing, but not knowing what it is or where to find it. We are searching for our true nature, our bull. Then comes discovering the footprints. We find the teachings, we read the books, we hear a talk, we realize there is a path. We have found the tracks of the bull and know we are not searching in vain. This is the start of our 20 lessons. In the third picture, we get our first glimpse of the bull. We have a flash of insight, a small awakening, a moment where we see our true nature, but it is fleeting, and the bull quickly disappears back into the woods. The fourth picture is catching the bull. This is the hard work of practice. We have a rope or a mindfulness, our discipline, and we struggle to tame the wild bull of our habitual mind, our ego, our tanha. It is a difficult and often violent struggle. In the fifth picture, taming the bull, the practice becomes more skillful. We learn to lead the bull with a gentle hand rather than a harsh whip. There is a growing harmony between our intention and our mind's habits. This is the discovery of the middle way. By the sixth picture, we are riding the bull home. The struggle is over. We are no longer fighting our mind. We are in harmony with it. The journey becomes joyful and effortless, like riding home on a peaceful evening playing a flute. The seventh picture is a great leap. The bull transcended. The practitioner has arrived home. He is so at one with his true nature that he no longer needs to think about it. The bull, the object of his search, is forgotten. The tools of practice are set aside. Then comes the eighth picture, the most profound of all, both bull and self transcended. This is represented by a simple, empty, circling enso. Here, all concepts have dissolved. There is no seeker, no bull. There is no self and no enlightenment. There is only the vast, open, luminous emptiness of shunyata. This is the peak of the mountain, the heart of realization. But the journey does not end in an empty void. This is the crucial point. The ninth picture is returning to the source. After the experience of pure emptiness, the world of form reappears. But now it is seen with new eyes. A tree is just a tree. A river is just a river. But they are perceived with a miraculous clarity and freshness, no longer filtered through the ego. The world is seen as sacred in its ordinary suchness. And this leads to the 10th and final picture, the completion of the circle in the world. The enlightened sage does not remain in blissful isolation on his mountaintop. He returns to the dusty, chaotic, and ordinary world. The picture shows him as a simple, joyful, pot-bellied man walking into the village marketplace with open hands and perhaps a bottle of wine. He is indistinguishable from anyone else. He doesn't preach or lecture. His very being radiates a simple, infectious joy and compassion. His presence brings a kind of awakening to those he meets: the fishmongers, the children, the merchants. He is not separate from the world. He is the world healing itself. This 10-part journey is the lesson of the Enso. The path begins in the marketplace of ordinary, confused life, and it ends in the marketplace of ordinary, enlightened life. It comes full circle. The enlightened being doesn't escape the world. They return to it with a transformed heart, able to engage with it fully, freely, and joyfully. All of the 19 lessons we have explored are simply different aspects of this one great circular journey. They are not a linear checklist to be completed, but a holistic set of skills and insights for walking this circle with grace. The end of the path is not a destination. It is the realization that the path itself is the goal, and that every point on the circle is both a beginning and an end. The lesson of the circle is that our practice is never finished. We are always a beginner, emptying our cup in each new moment. We are always finding the balance of the middle way. We are always seeing the truth of our interbeing. The path is not a line we walk to escape our lives. It is a circle that leads us deeper and deeper into the heart of life itself. Having walked this great circle of lessons, we are now prepared to ask not what comes next, but how we can live from this place of newfound understanding, right here in the world, in this very moment. We began this journey in a familiar place, a moment of modern confinement, a car stuck in a river of traffic, surrounded by the angry blare of horns and the relentless glow of notifications, a feeling of being trapped, of life being a series of frustrating obstacles to be endured. Let us return to that car for a moment. The outer world is the same. The light is still red, the traffic is still dense, the phone still buzzes with demands. But inside, everything has changed. The driver is no longer at war with the moment. The red light is no longer a personal affront, but an invitation, an opportunity to feel the breath enter and leave the body. The sound of the horn is just a sound, arising and passing away in a field of awareness. The faces in the other cars are no longer adversaries in a race, but fellow travelers, each caught in their own story, each a jewel in the great net of being. The scenery has not changed, but the eyes that see it have been transformed. The prison has become a monastery. This is the fruit of the entire journey we have taken together. We have walked a great circle from the acknowledgement of our suffering to the discovery of its cause in our own clinging mind. We have explored the liberating truths of impermanence and the empty, interconnected nature of all things. We have learned to meet our lives with the tools of mindfulness and acceptance, and we have reframed our greatest challenges, our failures, our conflicts, our grief, and our pain as our most profound teachers. The goal was never to eliminate the traffic jams from our life, for that is impossible. The goal was to find a peace so deep that it is not disturbed by them. The aim was never to stop the waves, but to learn how to surf. The core of this wisdom is a simple but revolutionary shift in perspective. Life is not happening to you, it is happening for you. The universe is not a hostile force to be battled, but a compassionate teacher, constantly presenting you with the exact lesson you need to learn next. The person who angers you is teaching you patience. The failure you experience is teaching you humility. The loss you grieve is teaching you the depth of your love. The mundane task you resent is teaching you presence. The teacher is always present. The only question is the student ready to learn? This path does not offer a magical escape from the realities of the human condition. It offers something far more powerful, the tools to engage with those realities with grace, courage, and an unshakable sense of inner freedom. You do not need to retreat to a distant mountain or change your name. The practice is here, in your relationships, in your work, in the quiet moments of your ordinary life. You already have everything you need: the capacity to be aware, the ability to be kind to yourself, the power to choose how you respond to this very moment. It all begins simply. It begins with one conscious breath, one moment of choosing to be the calm witness rather than the frantic victim, one conscious act of letting go. The journey of 1,000 miles, the journey home to your own true nature, begins with this single, simple step.